side. They're going to come up. So what's going to happen is everyone's comments on Facebook and Twitter, Facebook and YouTube is going to come up on the side, so you can see everyone's in one place. And if you guys actually have access to other pages on different platforms, you can actually, up to 30 different platforms, we can stream it on there as well. Yeah, so you guys got a week to to go and open some other, like, you know, these crazy kind of like gaming platforms and anything, just to spread the word of the channel, bro. Yeah, keep it alive, keep the channel alive. So if anyone can see, if anyone can hear, let us know. Inshallah, we are starting today. Today we have with us our wonderful, beautiful Munawwar guest from Northampton, is Molana Shahin Rahman. Right, so Molana Shahin Rahman. So guys, do you guys like this setup or do you prefer this setup? Is it okay? Because last time, I remember last week we didn't, Naveed. Remember when they were saying that the sound was not synced?
It sounds good today.
Were you like one of those dubbed movies and you were going like this? Hello.
The Japanese, yeah? You're like Japanese. You are really in trouble, my man. And it's like funny, have you watched those kind of ones where they kind of like come out with like the English is just so kind of, you never heard of this kind of English. You don't even hear of this kind of English in like, you know, in English lesson in school as well. So they're kind of crazy, kind of next level English.
I reckon they feel the same about us.
You dirty rat. Like, what's a dirty rat?
I reckon they feel the same about us when we go that way.
Yeah, I suppose so. I totally agree with you guys.
Everything is clear.
Okay, so everyone can see, yeah? So Jazakallah khair, guys. Today our live stream is about, guess what it's about? Tell us, Naveed. You said it beautifully a bit earlier.
Okay. Usually, you know, when you get it right the first time, I blundered the second time. But I think today we're going to speak about the difference in Islamic education from a university and from a madrasah. And we're going to go into a little bit about a detail about what kind of qualifications you walk away with from both institutes and what kind of career paths and basically what graduates from both places end up doing. And if there's any cultures, we're going to try and recognize that, inshallah. We're going to go into a little bit of detail about that.
So Molana Shahin Sab, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. There's nothing really, there's not a lot to say other than the fact that I'd studied in a Darul Ulum in England, and after which I took a few years of a gap year, you could say, 4 gap years in a row, and then I enrolled in a university, University of Warwick, and I'm still there now. Just got my dissertation left for a master's degree in Islamic education.
MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. So, where did you study exactly? Which madrasa?
I studied in Islamic Dawah Academy in Leicester, IDA. Okay. It's quite known as IDA.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And what made you, like, you're originally from Northampton, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm from Northampton, yeah.
So what made you kind of go all the way to Leicester Sharif? Did you have wuzu when you went to Leicester the first time?
I did actually, yeah. There's obviously a long story, but eventually, I think when I was around 15, year 11, that's when I started pondering about, all sorts of things about life and more so about theology, about the truth of the Quran, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and things. I thought I wanted to take my deen a lot more seriously. I'm not a child anymore. I wanted to, appreciate it for myself. I wanted to be a Muslim because, because of the truth of Islam, really. But I wanted to know that in a way that resonates with me, both intellectually as well as spiritually. So I thought, what better way other than, learning Arabic and accessing the Quran directly. And unfortunately, in Northampton, we didn't really have those facilities, and we still don't really. But the only, realistic avenue I had was to go to a Darul Ulum somewhere, and Leicester was the most convenient because it's only about an hour away.
Okay.
Did you stay over, Sheikh, while you were studying out there, or did you commute like nearly every other day, or how did it work?
No, I boarded there. We had to board over there. Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So you tend to come home during the holidays or every couple of weekends? How did it work?
It was quite flexible. So we got to come home every 2 weeks, and if you wanted to, then every 4 weeks or something, or you can just stay if you want to. But technically, you could come back every 2 weeks.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Okay, so so you were at school, or did you do school in Madrasah?
No, I did school in Northampton. I did in the mainstream in a public school.
Yeah, okay. I think that's like an interesting thing, because it would be good to actually see, for example, like in our society, the like Molanas who have actually gone through the school system, like so-called secular school system, in contrast to the Madrasah school system, right? I mean, it would be good to see how they affect their choices in the future. What kind of line they took?
It'll naturally affect everybody's, the mindset, the attitude, the way they carry themselves and everything. So I don't think it's just about doing school in madrasa or going to an Islamic school or going to a state school. I don't think it's just about that. It's more about where you live as well. So you guys are all from Birmingham. You have, Muslim populated city, you could say, Islamabad of the UK. But in Northampton, Muslims are a minority.
Of the UK. Ooh, that's a new one, bro.
So
I do not live in Islamabad, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
You live in the suburbs.
We're
I was going to put on his Facebook, when people have like, I'm safe.
More safe.
Sometimes have you seen that when people like just randomly like something like small will happen somewhere, and they like quickly put on their Facebook, I'm safe, by the way, guys, and people are thinking, well, no one asked you.
Gujaratis are safe in Islamabad. We've learned that today.
So yeah, go on.
So yeah, in Northampton, obviously, it's quite a Christian town. I used to think it was a lot more secular, a lot more atheist, where it looks like there's actually quite a strong Christian influence here, which I found out the hard way, actually. There's a long story behind that. We could get to that maybe, inshallah. But in terms of Muslims, we are a minority here. And in terms of within the Muslims, how much Islamic, practice is there among the people? It was a lot less, especially in the 2000s when we were growing up. Practicing Islam wasn't really, the norm there, or keeping a beard as a youngster. It's not really, even the adults weren't really keeping their beards and stuff. So it's very different. Being a teenager and having a beard was not. It wasn't an easy world to live in, you could say. The 2000s, late 2000s, and stuff.
Yeah,
so yeah, within
that's
that
interesting. I think that's an interesting point. When it comes to this, probably has got a whole like studies behind it. The psychology of Muslims being brought up in a minority and inferiority complexes, and especially at certain communities. I mean, I can imagine something like Leicester, where in certain areas of Leicester, there's a very strong presence of a certain like conservative approach.
There is, yeah, but I think there's pros and cons to both sides actually, and you can't always notice that straight away. Sometimes you might go somewhere and you think, wow, everybody my age, all of my friends, all of my classmates are hafiz of the Quran. They've lived in a protected environment all their life, kind of thing. But then after a few years, you start realizing, hold on a minute, they haven't really experienced real life. They haven't experienced the world outside. So from there, it's like. It's like, oh, we've kept you in this bubble, we've kept you in this, protected environment. You're going to figure out what happens, in the real world afterwards. And here we're like, hold on a minute, we came from the real world, we lived in the real world, and after Madrasah, we came back to the real world. So we never really had that protective environment in the first place. We were exposed to everything that everybody was already exposed to. So I think naturally that affects our attitude towards studying while in Darul Uloom as well. Whereas somebody who grew up in a Muslim environment with a practicing Muslim family, with scholarship in their family, I think sometimes it becomes just a norm that you just have to go through madrasa, you just have to learn Arabic, you have to just pass all your exams and carry on the family tradition. Whereas if you're coming from a minority context where nobody in your family has ever dreamt of learning Arabic or dreamt of accessing the Quran or the Hadith literature, or the Turath at large, our Islamic educational heritage at large, then you think, the way you approach learning, the way you approach, thinking and reflecting about life, or about the deen in general, or about, everything, your attitude will be very, very different, and you might actually mature a lot quicker than a lot of your peers might. So I think this is really interesting. And
if I can ask you a question, Molana. So would you, like, if there's a scale of 1 to 10, how sort of like practicing, I don't know if this is the right word, how sort of a practicing family did you come from?
Well, I think that's a bit of a personal question, which we don't really need to.
So out of 1 to 10, roughly,
well,
the reason being is because, for example, I started Madrasah and my family was for like almost one practicing, in the sense that they didn't understand Islam as a way of living. It was more of a culture.
Yeah.
And I've seen Madrasah students who have gone into Madrasah who are from like really sort of like religious families. And then I've seen some people who have come from like the ghetto, basically, like me, right? You're just off the streets.
Birmingham.
You still got your, spliff jeans on. One of the spliff jeans.
I think the bigger question here is actually
Spliffy. What was Spliffy? What was it?
Nafco. You remember Nafco?
Nafco. So when I was in Madrasah, the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen a lot of people who actually have that kind of like family support system in place, religious family support system in place. I found that they had a head start over everyone else from those people who actually didn't have a family support system, who didn't understand what the idea of studying was. In fact, they actually were like torn between two societies, where many of the parents who were like not practicing thought it was a waste of time studying in Madrasah. Like the common things that I was told was, at the end of it, you're not going to earn anything. You do know the rest of your life you're going to earn pennies. You do know if the rest of your life people are just going to see you as a Maulvi in a mosque.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I felt, in the back of my mind, I was thinking to myself, you know what, in a way, I've never seen any Maulvi that has actually, financially done something for himself. When this was in the 90s, this was. So I didn't see anything. And I thought to myself, you know what, I don't care really. Right, I'm just going to go for it. And whatever happens, it was just like, a shot in the dark, this was.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm just going to go for it. I didn't really know what my future was, what I'm going to do in the future. I don't know if I was going to become an imam or anything. But then at the same time, when I see people who are like religious from like their fathers or a Molana or something, and then they got into the Madrasah or their grandparents, it was like many of them, you had that two sort of like groups. One group was they were not interested in studying. It was just like they knew that all they have to do is they have to just cover a few, these hurdles, and that's it. They get a qualification, and they automatically can get themselves a place booked in a particular madrasa or a particular, institute or something. And to me, that was quite unfair. It was like an unfair advantage that they had. And I don't know if Naveed and Altaf, I don't know if this kind of like resonates with you guys as well. If you ever saw this, but there was this kind of like thing that we would see an unfair and uneven sort of balance in the religious practicing.
Yeah, I think I saw that as well. Definitely, I saw the same thing. And 90s and 2000s were very different. We had exactly the same background. It looks like in terms of nobody's ever seen proper scholarship before. The types of people who would be sent to madrasa, nobody would willingly go to madrasa. Everybody would be sent there, and they'll usually be the ones who failed in school, or they were they got up to no good or something, and the parents wanted to fix them by sending to madrasa. So that was the kind of culture that I kind of came from, but that's not the mindset that I had. So when I wanted to actually actively go and learn something, I actually had a condition. I set some conditions upon myself as well. I thought, I'm not going to go to a cultural one, or at least from whatever I knew as a 15, 16-year-old. Like those who have those who want to indoctrinate you into big, just adopting the values of your culture. I don't really want to go to an institute like that, because we already got that. We know what the deal is. I want to learn Islam for what it actually is in an objective way. So that's what I try to do. Of course, when you're 15, there's only so much research that you can actually do about it.
Objective. Objective way.
I'm using these words.
What would that mean? I think a lot of listeners would probably kind of be thinking like, oh, so you don't do taqleed, yeah? Objective. Are you like anti-taqleed? Are you Vabi? Yeah. What's this?
I'm speaking as a 15-year-old, of course. As in, you just want to learn what Islam is, isn't it? You just want to learn You know, what does Allah want from me? What does you know, like all these taqeed issues? I didn't really know what any of that was. So that's the kind of background we came from. So when I was first told that we were Hanafi, I was like, well, what on earth is that? You know, there was 4 imams, and of those 4 imams, we follow somebody called Abu Hanifa. And I was like, hold on, I've never heard of this guy in my life yet. So that's the kind of background we came from. So educationally speaking, we didn't really have that much of an Islamic background. Obviously, you know how to perform your salah, you might memorize certain surahs of the Quran, and that's about it really. Everything else is just whatever's within I have a Bangladeshi culture. So the British Bangladeshi culture, whatever Islamic values are embedded within that culture, that's the kind of culture we'll grow up in. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, because we have an oral tradition. So the British Bangladeshi tradition, obviously the one that came from the villages in Bangladesh, it was an oral tradition. It wasn't a literate one. So we didn't grow up with books around us. We didn't grow up with, you know, reading and stuff like that. So it's the oral tradition that you have from within the community. That's the kind of...
Speaking of a Bangladeshi tradition, guys, I've got 3 new lungis, yeah?
Yeah, I saw it on your Twitter, actually.
Yeah. Have you seen that one, yeah? So I mentioned in class, I said, guys, where do you get lungis from? And 3 guys bought some lungis for me. Apparently they had some at home stashed away.
Were they used ones or new ones?
Hopefully new. Hopefully new, boy. And Abdul Hayy saying to me, are you going to go bike riding in that? And I said, well, if you want there to be another lockdown in Birmingham. Yeah. So I mean, I like lungis, you know. Lungis are quite... When I was in Madrasah, okay? Yeah. So come on, say it, guys.
When I was in Madrasah.
So we used to have Malaysian students and Indonesian students. We used to have students from Bangladesh as well. And they used to wear lungis all the time. And I tell you about the Sri Lankan guy, yeah? Astaghfirullah. Right? When you wear a lungi, do not sleep under the fan, bro. Yeah? Because you're going to have nightmares after that. So basically, so every one of them used to tie the lungi in a different style. It's like traditionally a different way of tying a lungi. So I don't know how, Molana, how you kind of like tie the lungi. Yeah, but I do this like the simple way. It's like the one cloth lungi stitched. Yeah. It's like a circular. And you stand inside of it like a hula hoop. Yeah. And then you fold one side and then you fold the other side and then you just like roll it up.
That's how our women actually dress in saris. So that's not how the men tie the lungis here.
No, that's actually Indonesian style.
Let's not move on from that.
I've seen people do that. I've not seen any Bangladeshi do that, but I have seen people in Leicester do something like that as well.
So what do you get the 2 sides and you make them into like two not them?
No. Well, I can't really show you on camera, isn't it? So it's just you just have to grow up in a Bangladeshi family to know how it's done.
Just to clarify, the way Mufti Liaquat wears his lungi, he wears it like a sari then. Is that what you're saying?
Somewhat, or he ties it a bit like a sari.
Okay, just to clarify, Naveed is trying to have a dig here, yeah?
Mufti Sahab, all you need to do is to save a little piece and you can put it over your shoulder as well.
Then it's a full sari.
Just as a disclaimer, there are many ways of tying a lungi from different continents and different cultures.
Suleiman Kanani in the comments. Are you reading the comments? Suleiman saying it's a Bengali secret. Allah.
I thought you put it on like an ihram, like you know how you tie that. Is that not how you wear it?
The ihram that I got is just like one long piece of towel cloth.
Yeah.
And I just like wrap it around several times and tuck it in.
No. Okay, back to education now.
This is education. What are you talking about, Nav?
You know, in fact, let me tell you, Molana will probably correct me on this, that the Prophet ﷺ is said to have never worn a pair of trousers. He wore lungi.
I was hoping we'd come to that discussion, actually. And, it looks like from the reports that we have, is that the Prophet ﷺ wore an izar. And izar in Arabic is not the same as the izar in Urdu. So
isn't it?
It means trousers, doesn't it?
Okay, yeah.
So, in Arabic, the word for trousers is sirwal. And so the word izar is basically just a gown that you have at the bottom. So it's, you have an upper shawl or a rida. What do you call the rida in English? Like ihram, you could say. You know, the ihram is a massive cloth at the top and you have a cloth at the bottom. So Yeah, so it looks like from the descriptions that we see, they translate it as a loincloth as well. In English, the word is loincloth. And
Isn't like a loincloth what like in those tribes in South America? Isn't that a loincloth?
I wouldn't know.
No, what is that? Because to me, loincloth represents that area that you cover, the genital area, the private area.
Possibly, but then again, that's what your lower garments cover, doesn't it? So your upper garment would cover your back, and your lower garment covers your legs. So
Yeah.
but
I prefer the word lower garment than loincloth. Loincloth seems a bit too kind of like small.
Descriptive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the point is, if you look into the books of hadith, you don't really find examples. Or if somebody does find it, now of course share it with us. But it looks like the word sirwal or the trouser wasn't really worn. There may be something about it, but in terms of wearing it, the Arabs generally wore the izar. It looks like the lungi, as we would say.
So this is a question, a bit controversial then. So, for example, like there's many communities who are very adherent to a specific like uniform, right? So if they want to be very specific, I don't see many of them wearing lungis.
Exactly, yeah. So that's actually I have a personal experience with that. When I was in Leicester, I once walked into Fajr Salah with a lungi under my thobe, right? And so afterwards, somebody took me to the side. I think I did it for about 2 days or something, and I was taken to the side and said, you shouldn't be wearing these types of things in the masjid. I was like, why not? What's wrong with it? Yeah. Eventually, I just gave up. I thought, you know what? These guys are older than me. I was 16 at the time. I thought I'll leave it. So I'll carry on wearing trousers. But then it's really strange, because if you're going to talk about a sunnah type of clothing, and of course we know there's a huge controversy about what does it even mean to wear sunnah clothing. But if we are going to have a literalist approach to clothing, wearing a white thobe or something like that, then trousers, where does trousers come into that? It doesn't really make sense. So if we're going to go down what the urf says, what the custom of the people in Arabic is called urf from the Islamic terminology, then what is the custom of the people? So in those types of communities, in the Indian communities and others, you might have to wear trousers, which is fine. But then when you come back to our British Bangladeshi communities, there's no problem walking into the masjid with a lungi on, whether that's under your thobe, whether that's under your shirt,
or with the vest on. The vest.
No, you wouldn't do that in the masjid. That's obviously considered inappropriate.
So when is an urf established? So like when you're talking like Leicester and certain type of Gujarati community, like they say like izar or whatever they wear is in your situation, like the example you went over. At what point do we as British Muslims become generational where we have our own urf?
See, this is it's a big question, but I don't think we can ever say that the British Muslim community has one urf. It's just not going to happen, because the British Muslim community there's no such thing as one British Muslim community. The Muslims of London are very, very different from the Muslims of Leicester and Blackburn, for example. The Muslims of Birmingham are very different from the Muslims in Northampton. Yeah, so there are various factors that are involved here. Both ethnically, those people who are born and raised in Britain and are indigenous Brits and they accepted Islam, or their parents or grandparents accepted Islam, their urf or their custom will be very different from somebody who's a child of an immigrant. Yeah, but those people.
So Molana, could you say that based on that, and based on the fact that we're not a homogeneous community and we have like different parts all over the country, could you actually say that our urf doesn't exist, or it's so diverse that you couldn't really point a finger at it?
100%.
Which then makes you lead on to something else, right? Which then says that all those things that you guys will know in fiqh is related to urf. Like, how are we supposed to understand that?
Yeah, so a common question that comes up is about, well, it's not necessarily a question, but an issue that comes up is mahr. When you get married to somebody, when you get married, how much should the mahr be? What's the sunnah mahr? People tend to talk about things, and every community not every community, some communities try to make it out as though their custom is the sunnah, which is obviously an inappropriate back projection onto the sharia. So the sharia depends how you're going to look at that. If you're going to take, what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam pay his wives, or what did the Sahaba radiallahu anhum pay one another in terms of mahr, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, what is the custom of our people? And the books of fiqh, especially Hanafi fiqh, they would say, فَلَهَا مَهْرُ مِثْلِهَا. So she will get the mahr of, her whatever is normal within her family. So that can change, quite drastically among different communities within Britain. So, for example, if you're living in Leicester, if you're living in Gujarati community and stuff, a standard mahr would be around £121 or something like that. They tend to have an odd number at the end of it because of
21 pence.
No, I don't think they go that far. But in Allah yuhibbul witr. Indeed, Allah is an odd number, and He likes odd numbers. So out of that, they put an odd number at the end of it. So sometimes you'll have £101, £121, £301, or something like that, and sometimes they go a bit higher, and what they call mahr fatimi. So mahr fatimi is, I believe, it's a misunderstood concept, but we'll get to that later, inshallah. But they tend to consider that around 600 and something pounds generally, which can obviously fluctuate. But that's considered something a lot higher than usual. But if you come to a Bangladeshi culture, then a standard mahr would be between £2,000 to £10,000. So that's so for you that'll be a surprise. For us, it's like that's absolutely normal. Whether that's cash, whether it's gold. Also, one interesting thing is we still have the gold culture.
Okay, so can I stop you there? In Bangladeshi community, I've seen this happen. I've done some nikahs. And they tend to not give the mahr until the guy divorces her or dies. Is this common?
What? Possibly, I wouldn't know.
Because I've spoken to that whenever I answer zakat questions.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be speaking to a guy and he'll say to me, "Oh, I still got to give her mahr." I go, "For how many years?" He goes, 15 years. I go, "What? How come you haven't given it?" Oh, he goes, "But don't I give it when when we divorce?"
I think there's a lot of culture that's intertwined with the religion. It becomes quite difficult for the normal person to decipher what is the deen and what is our Bangladeshi culture. So generally, what Bangladesh would do is that they will give the gold. So if they have around £6,000-7,000 worth of gold, that would be given immediately. And in terms of cash, what they generally do the mahr, even though really the whole thing is the mahr, but technically on paper, the cash might be the mahr, and then the gold would be considered a gift or something. Again,
is that the cabin or something like that? It's called.
I don't really know what that is, but a lot of that is going in my generation.
Okay. So I just want to. I think I'm going to interject here and move the conversation back to the point. What you've mentioned here, for example, about this urf issue. So we're living in the UK, yeah. Do you think that the sort of like approach of the madrasa has been verbatim imported, and it's trying to be preserved exactly how it was set up in India, old India?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So there's parts of it that's what the case was. Is to
I'll give you some examples for those who probably are not aware. For example, in madrasa, there's a high emphasis in many madrasas shit on the floor. And there's a high emphasis on, for example, like reading books that are like old books. Yeah, like kind of don't read from your tablet or something, read from a book.
Yeah.
Or things like, when you're studying, you shouldn't, I mean, this sounds a bit silly, but things like when you're studying, you shouldn't be listening to other scholars. You should only be listening to your own teacher. You should never, you should not disagree. Like, although I disagree with this totally. Like, you shouldn't disagree with your teacher. Yeah, you should have adab, and the adab level is like extreme adab level where you can't even look at your teacher sometimes. You can't stare at your teacher.
So again, I think what we need to clarify here is what is Islam and what is a cultural custom. Yeah. So sometimes when a cultural custom has Islamic values within it, everything can get blurred afterwards. So because the British Muslim community, if you want to use that phrase, in terms of the Darul Ulum and the Madrasa context, is quite immigrant, as in it's not really, it's not exactly British indigenous white Muslims who have accepted Islam and they've suddenly come out with all these madaris and things. It came from abroad, right? So naturally they will have a lot of customs that are going to be imported. So now generally that's happened throughout history. Now if you look, we've got 1400 years of history. It's not just 200 years. It's not 150 years, 250 years worth of history, right? Now, what needs to happen is throughout those years, throughout those generations and those centuries, what people have done is you have to keep the core of Islam, right? You have to keep the core of the Sunnah, What is the Quran's teachings? What are the what are the teachings of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What are the principles of those? So you have to figure out what those are, and then you figure out what are those rulings and ideas that are related to custom, that are related to the politics of your own country or your own land that you're living in, the kind of mindset, because the Sharia gives a space for that. The Sharia is not a totalitarian thing where your principles are dictated and your furu' or your tertiary issues, your nitty-gritty things are dictated as well. Those types of things have been kept open and broad. That's why Islam is obviously dynamic and it's applicable to all cultures and contexts, which is why living in England, we might be speaking English, we might be eating certain types of food, dressing in a certain type of way. You go to a different country, you go to somewhere in Africa, you go somewhere in the Asian world, you go to the Arab world, you go to Turkey, people will be eating different types of food. So nobody's going to say, any of this is un-Islamic. The only way you'll say it's un-Islamic is if it's got alcohol involved, if it's got pork involved, if it's got haram, content involved, right? If everything is halal within the boundaries of the Sharia, then it doesn't. You can adopt the culture, you can adopt those things from the people around you, and we find precedents of this from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. So this in terms of the foods that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ate. He actually rejected certain type of food because لا يأكله قومي كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. My people don't eat this type of food, so it doesn't really fit with me. I can't really eat this types of things. So you can do that, and other people might eat something because it's our culture. For example, in Ramadan, what kind of food would you eat in Ramadan? Now, Bangladeshis, we tend to have a specific dish called khichdi. So this is a rice-based dish. And what that does is, after a long day of hunger and starvation, where you haven't really eaten anything, you've got an empty stomach. This is supposed to be good for you on an empty stomach, and it doesn't, it doesn't affect you the way spices and chilies, all these types of things would. So, which is fine if you want to import that over here. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But to associate or to think that Ramadan is about kisuri and you can't really be a good Muslim, or you can't have a good Ramadan without kisuri, for example, that would be wrong. But nobody does that. Nobody does that. We all know that, this is a Bangladeshi thing. Ramadan is an Islamic thing, and this is how we celebrate it in our context, or this is how we partake in it in our context. So the same thing can happen in terms of learning as well, in terms of approaching religion, in terms of going to Madrasah, going to studying, and these types of things. It will inevitably happen. Like, for example, what language should you learn in? So a lot of the Darul Ulooms in England teach through the Urdu medium. And now, you could say the pros and cons to that. You can argue whichever way you want. But at the same time, you'll have to see, the context of your own people. Why did people use Urdu in the first place? It's because that was the language of their people in Northwest India. Now, it was all Northwest India generally, which is fine, and nobody's got a problem with that. So before that, they used Farsi within that medium, Persian within that region.
I just want to ask Altaf and Naveed here a question, which is, how much do you see like this sort of like outer sort of representation, or so-called representation of Islam? How much of that do you see that people take as being Islam rather than what Molana is talking about? So, for example, like, how much do you see people emphasizing more on things like the way you wear clothing, or the way that certain like words, cliche words that you say, make you a Muslim? What's your sort of like observations on that?
So I come from a Gujarati community, right? Which makes this really interesting, because the phenomenon of what you're talking about, kind of like, you can either start it with the start of Deoband, or you can start it at the time of Shah Waliullah, rahmatullahi alayhi. You can kind of go like 250, 300 years, right? And you can see how that the phenomena develops, and then how it comes over into the UK, and how people feel like they're losing not only their cultural identity but also their religious identity, and they've infused them so much that it becomes really difficult for people to kind of disentangle them. And what you're talking about here is clothing. What you're talking about here is the way that you are, the language that you speak, how you conduct yourselves, how you follow things, how you growing your beard, and all of these kind of things can come together to really create a restrictive form of Islam, where you're just your whole relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based upon just rules and the fear of breaking rules, as opposed to anything else. And there should be more of a balance.
Fear of breaking rules. Like what do you kind of?
rules that are built on sand in it, Mufti Sahib. You know, like where I'm trying to think of a specific example. Okay, let's go in Leicester, right? Somewhere like Leicester and wearing jeans or something like that. Like, you know, like
Wearing jeans in Leicester, Allah.
wearing jeans in Leicester,
Say
like
the two words together, jeans and Leicester.
You know, in certain parts it can be frowned upon. All right, maybe it's a yesteryear talk, so it's an older thing, but kind of like those kind of things where they're related to imitating. You know, and when you come to those kind of things and you try to understand them, it's very difficult, and that's what kind of pushes people away. They look at it and they think this just doesn't make any sense.
Has anyone ever said to you, Altaf, that the clothing that you're wearing is not right?
Yeah, of course.
Apart from that Arsenal top, but
Like it's the 1988 Arsenal top, Michael Thomas. Liverpool fans, if you're out there, this is for you. No, but you'll generally get people who will say that, oh, you need to wear a specific way. You need to wear specific colors. Like, I used to wear thobes, like whatever color I could find my hands on and just wear a thobe and hope it was ironed. But like you go into some mosques and they'll be like, no, you know what? You need to wear white and you need to do this and you need to be like that. And you're just like, yeah, all right, you guys are a bit too much for me.
yeah, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting because I actually had a friend who actually was like publicly told off for under his jubba having 3 quarters on, and the guy said to him, he said that, you know, this is the clothes of so and so people. You should be wearing like the cotton, you know, cotton trousers. Yeah, that when you sit on the mimbar, you can see like certain shapes, you know, those kind of ones. And he got really upset because in public, you know, you don't kind of like tell someone off in public for clothing that they're wearing. And then it was like, I was thinking to myself, like, look how people have kind of like focused the entire sort of like conduct of a Muslim, right? Forget backbiting is wrong, forget lying is wrong, forget, you know, slander is wrong, or all these kind of things. It's like, no. The clothing you're wearing, you know, why has it got like a rubber elastic band in there? You should have a rope in there. That's the original way it should be. But then it's like what Molana was saying. How far back do you go?
Yeah, and I think in terms of you know, what we really need to think about is what are the principles of the Sharia when it comes to clothing, right? So we know it can't be tight that it reveals your, you know, the shape of your body parts. It can't be transparent, for example. Transparent is another one. Now, certain types of trousers that people you know, put out there that they are Islamic, or these are Islamic type of trousers. These are the types of trousers you're supposed to wear. If you're doing wudu and then they get wet, you can see everything under those trousers because they become really transparent. Those thin white ones, yeah. So then again, to what extent are you going to say, okay, these are Islamic, but then certain types of other trousers aren't? But anyway, bringing it back to
I've actually seen this, and it's very sort of like strange because I've seen certain Molanas that have come from India. And the clothes that they wear, they'll wear like this, like very tightish kind of like trousers, and then the shirt will actually not be a full shirt; it goes down to the knees. It goes like in between, and then when they sit on the mimbar to give a talk, it's like you're thinking like, you know, this is like, forget imitating certain tribes and people. This guy's showing us things that we're not supposed to look at.
I think we need to be careful here on both sides. Actually, that even though that might not necessarily be the British way to do things, but at the same time, if somebody's come from India, then that's his culture, that's his custom that he's used to. So we can't really, you know, be hypocritical and look down.
But I think Islamically, having that kind of like know-how that, you know, body shapes, you know, wearing tight, sitting in certain postures. That. So anyway, going back to what we were saying. So the Madrasah system that we kind of have today, you know, that's developing slowly. There's like an array of madrasas you have in the UK. You'll have the very conservative ones who focus more, and I've heard people say this to me. They'll say to me, we focus more on adab and character building rather than knowledge. We don't really care much about the student gaining too much knowledge. It's more about this idea of we want someone, a youngster, to grow up in an environment protecting their iman, protecting their faith, so that they can grow up to be upright Muslims in the community with good character. So then you have like another total other side of the spectrum. You'll have ones who will, you know, who the first may not consider to be true students of knowledge. And the reason I'm saying this is because where I teach in a Sufa Institute, unfortunately, I've heard some individuals, certain institutes, who say things like the students of a sufa, they don't even make them wear topis on their head, right? They come in wearing any clothes that they want, and the guys don't have like full beards, and it's like basically it's like they don't care about adab and etiquette, and then they'll quote like Abdullah Mubarak studied 18 years of adab, whatever that meant, and they're taking it to mean
that's
sitting on the one knee. It's like sitting on the one knee. Have you seen that picture of that doctor in America, who's a very famous pathologist? And Dr. I think Hussein Sattar, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And they have that famous picture of him eating food, sitting down, and everyone going, Subhanallah. You're thinking, this is a picture someone took at eating. It could have been any time in his life. Now that picture is probably 20, 25 years old. But everyone's circulating it as though, it's like, this is how everyone should be. All the doctors should be sitting like this when you're eating food on the floor with one knee.
I think at the same time there is room for something like that. I think we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are obviously.
So you would say sitting on the floor is something that we should encourage people to do?
Not necessarily encourage, but it's something that if somebody does do that, then it's not something that we should mock or look down upon or forbid them from doing that. If somebody wants to, like there are restaurants actually in the UK, in Manchester, I went to a specific restaurant. And these aren't, they're not Indians or they're not Bangladeshis or Pakistani. These were Arabs, I think, Yemeni. And so it's called Hadramaut. And they actually cater on the floor. So you have these...
but I don't think that's for religious purposes. I think that's just the culture, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think if you treat culture as culture, sitting on the floor as a cultural thing, I mean, I don't have an issue with that. But
So,
when
yeah.
people kind of think that this has a religious value to it, it's more like if there was two people sitting, one on the floor and one on a table and chair, which one's more religious? Which one's more closer to God?
Yeah, you don't have enough information to
Yeah, so I think that's what's happening with people when they see. I mean, I've seen this happen to me. I've sat on a table and some guy said to me, "Shouldn't you be sitting on the floor, Molana?"
Yeah.
And then
So-
I'll say to him, "Well, am I sitting in the sky? I am obviously sitting on the floor." It's like, the chair's connected to the floor. Where do you want me to sit? First floor, second floor, third floor, the floor. So it
Just
kind
to-
of gets a bit silly. I think after a while when people sort of like take these little sort of like issues and they start to. Because the reason I'm saying this is because in Pakistan we have this problem as well in many madrasas where the sort of like the outer customs of the madrasa are seen as being an integral part of Islam. So for example, sitting on the floor, it's like I've heard some people say ilm can't come to you if your knees don't hurt. And I got arthritis, and I get pains in my knees, and I just say, you know what, I'm doing it for Allah's sake. I'm going to sit on my knees. So there was a Molana from India who came to Pakistan. He was from a very well-known madrasa, Nadwa. And he was doing a tour. So he came to Monatari Jamil's madrasa. And in Monatari Jamil's madrasa, he asked them, he said, how many madaris do you have in Faisalabad? So he said, he goes, oh, we only have about this many. He goes, what do you mean this many? Are you talking about like the Deobandis, the Barelvis, everyone? He goes, oh no, just our Deobandis. He goes, but are the Barelvis and are the Salafis and are their madrasas, are they not fine? Just because they might sit on tables and chairs, it doesn't mean that they're any less than you in ilm, right? That's just an easier way. It's facilitating for them. They go, no, this was a good one. They said, oh no, when you sit on the floor, you're more energetic, and when you sit on a chair, you're more lazy. He goes, in Dora Hadith, he goes, you get students who go to sleep in class on the floor, on the book. And he goes, it doesn't make sense. Like you're trying to justify, people try to justify why sitting on the floor is more rewarding. And like I guarantee you, there's going to be someone who's written a book on the benefits of sitting on the floor. To kind of
you obviously get people. You get a lot of people who clutch at straws just to justify their own way, their own culture, kind of thing, without critically engaging with it. And it all goes back to what I was saying, that you have to examine Islam for what it is, the Quran for what it is, the Hadith for what it is. So, like Mufti Liaquat was saying earlier about certain types of institutes, they prefer to focus more on etiquette, more on adab. I say adab and etiquette in the inverted commas. But in reality, if you're going to claim to focus on that and with little focus on knowledge, then how do you know that this adab is an Islamic adab, or this etiquette is an Islamic etiquette, or this concept is actually an Islamic thing? Because what if you find in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ did exactly the opposite? I'll give you an example, right? I'll give you an example. Sometimes in some communities where you might get taught is, if you eat with the roti, bread, chapatis and stuff, then so some people will say, you're supposed to put the salan on top, the curry on. You put the curry on the plate first, and then you put the roti or the bread or the chapatis on top of that. The reason being because there's in terms of adab, you respect the bread, you respect the roti, because I believe there's a report reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, apparently, as it said, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam apparently said, "Akrimul khubz," honor the bread. Now, firstly, there's obviously two things to that. Firstly, that hadith is actually a weak report, and you don't really practice upon these two things. Somebody might say, yes, this is a virtue here, this is the other, but then there's an issue here. It actually contradicts an authentic narration. So in Sahih al-Bukhari, we actually find a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam having meat or something, and bread was basically put on top of that, or rotis were, or whatever type of bread they were eating, it was put on top of it, or they were eating in that particular way. So it's sorry, the other way around. As in, the bread was there, and the salan or the curry or whatever they were eating, the staple, the diet of whatever they were eating was on top of that. So we have evidences of that. So in that case, what do you do now? Because Islamically speaking, you can't say that the other one is actually the sunnah, or this is the Islamic adab. This is the way that you would go about it. But really, these foods, how to eat, how to dress, how to talk, how to walk, all these types of things. There are certain things that are Islamic. There are certain things that are the hallmark of a Muslim. There are other things that are just about fitting with your own culture. So this is a custom of your people. I think we need to know what the difference is. So in terms of like marriage, let's say, how do you get married? How do you not get married? What do you do in the walima? How much money do you spend in the walima? A lot of it, there are Islamic teachings there. There are Islamic guidelines there. There are certain things that can make a wedding un-Islamic. But at the same time, there is room for your own culture to take place here. Like, for example, should the bride dress in a white dress? Should she dress in a red dress? Now, living in a country like England, you would have both options. That, for example, traditionally in the Bangladeshi culture, they wear red. A bride would generally wear red, all red. Yeah. Now in Britain, or in the English context, in the Western context, brides tend to wear white. They're dressed in white. Now you kind of have both urfs here. You kind of have both customs here. Now you can't really say one is Islamic or the other one isn't. Just look, as long as she's covered properly, and as long as her whole the aura and everything is covered, and as long as there's no un-Islamic things going on, everything else is open to the custom of your people. I think that balance needs to be known there. So what some people would tend to do, generally see this in America, that they focus so much on the custom of the people that they actually, they do away with certain aspects of the Sharia itself. And you find this is pretty common in America, at least from what we see of it, what we hear of it. But and others.
I mean, it might be interesting to bring. I mean that's a bit of a general statement there.
Of course, we generalize everything. You can't.
I know quite a lot of people in America, and I think they are quite observant of.
Yeah,
I think it's
I've got
maybe.
a question.
Yeah,
I've got a question just to move the conversation on slightly, because I think we're going to get bogged down in this one. When we're talking about Darul Ulooms, and you mentioned something, right? You mentioned, both of you were speaking about kind of like how some Darul Uloom study more on knowledge and some Darul Uloom study on like the adab and developing the characteristics of a person. What are we as members of the community supposed to expect, right, from students who attend the Darul Uloom? Are you, what is scholarship and what is about kind of like actually coming and serving your community? Because one of the things that we normally find is that there seems to be this massive disjuncture between the two things. Like now, before I used to look at scholars as leaders within the community, I no longer look at them like that. I don't think they have the skill sets. I don't think they're developed enough to do some of those things.
That's a big generalization there as well.
Sorry. Not to say it's absent in all of them, right? I'm not saying that none of them are community leaders or none of them are leaders. I'm just saying generally not all of them are leaders, right? There are.
Sorry, Altaf. So just to clarify, when you say, for example, like leader.
I don't want to get bogged down on that part of it. What I want to get really kind of focused in on is the
can't
fact
just say one thing and then
no. Sorry, Molana, I'll give you a specific question. The specific question is, what are we supposed to expect from Darul Ulooms?
Yeah, so that That can be up to. I think there does need to be some sort of autonomy for the stakeholders behind Darul Ulooms. That what do they want to focus on, and they should be clear about that. So if somebody wants to focus more on etiquette and things, they should be clear about it from the start, instead of saying oh, this is a scholarship course. Somebody who does this, you'll attain this type of level. This is what you're going to study. These are the aims and objectives of attending our institute. But then once you go there, it's actually something else altogether. So I think that's quite dishonest, and this is not, this is not in line with the etiquette of a believer, of Muslims, right? But at the same time, I think what we should expect from Darul Ulooms, is not that it should be. I know this kind of changed now, but in the 90s, in the 2000s, it was looked at as a place of, my son's got into alcohol, my son's getting to, he gets into too many fights in school. Let's throw him into madrasa and fix him up. It's a character building. I don't think it should just be restricted to character building, because that's not what scholarship is. Darul Ulum means the house of knowledges, the house of sciences. So it's not the house of rectification. It's not rehabilitation clinic. If you want to fix your child, send him to a therapist. Send him to
I think that's a very valid point there. I think excellent, hit the nail on the head. I think this is a problem because I deal with a lot of. I'm in charge of director of studies at Sufa. I see this a lot in students where parents will simply just send their students, their kids, expecting, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and expecting, what, the madrasa will sort them out. Right, the madrasa, these guys are like very pious guys. They'll make dua to Allah. They'll stay in the noor environment, like this kind of like environment of barakah, and the children will automatically, like for somehow, will just click.
No, it does work. As in, let's be honest, quite a lot of the times. Well, not always. Sometimes it's not going to work, but many times it does work. But the problem is that shouldn't.
I mean, sorry, I disagree with that.
Okay, fair enough.
I've seen it when I was in Pakistan. Unfortunately, I actually saw parents would send their children to Pakistan to study, and guys got hooked on drugs.
Okay.
Guys got hooked on things, and there was no way of being able to reform their character. Even in madrasas that are very, very well known for this idea of reformation, you'd find guys that to end of their graduation, they had this kind of like they had this grudge against the madrasa. They had grudge against ulama.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's quite common here as well. Actually, like in maktabs and stuff, if there's physical beatings going on, then the child, you might be a 12-year-old and you get battered in the madrasa or something, and then you grow up having a resentment towards these types of people. And later on, once they become adults, a lot of these can leave Islam. This is a lot more dangerous than people make it out to be. But my point was, let's say hypothetically, let's say it works that you send them into a madrasa, then generally they will fix up. Now, even if it works, that's not the point of the Darul Ulum. That's a secondary benefit that you're going to get. That's like saying, let's send somebody to university. Fair enough. They might not, learn a lot or whatever, but at least they have a place to stay. At least they're going to have food to eat and stuff, right? That's not really the reason why you send somebody to university. Somebody can, take out a loan or something, go to university and stay on campus and pay their rent or whatever. But that's not the point. The point of going to university isn't to have a place to stay. The point of going to university is to specialize in a specific field and to get a degree and to come out, get writing skills, all sorts of things like that. So again, like Darul Ulum might serve, they might have it might be a multi-purpose organization, but the primary objective of a Darul Ulum should be to teach, to enable the students. I'm not going to say teach, I'll change it. To enable the students to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about what He wants from us, to learn about the Quran, and do that in an academic way, as in learn Arabic, learn the tradition, learn the Turath, learn the usul of how to engage with scripture.
Okay, so I got a question for you, Molana.
Go on.
So, like for the people out there, I mean, a lot of people watching this would probably be thinking, okay, someone who studies in a madrasa, when they come out, they are the optimum sort of like epitome of knowledge. These guys know the Quran. I mean, this is what general public's view of a graduate would be. Like they would treat, for example, like in the UK, if you have like some of the well senior scholars of the UK and you have some guy who's graduated, they'll kind of equate them to be the same thing.
Well,
right. So, sorry, let me just finish the question. So, what I'm saying is that, first of all, when it comes to graduates, I think there needs to be, like I said, transparency. There needs to be a transparency in the madrasa policy or wherever that tells them, look, we're not doing an alim course, I think, right? And then the person says, well, aren't you teaching Bukhari? Well, okay, that's where the problem lies. It's when you are misleading parents or you're misleading the students into thinking that this person is going to become a qualified scholar. So from your experience, people who qualify from madrasas, do they have the same critical thinking faculties when it comes to being able to understand the Sharia? Like you're saying that they need to be able to understand the Sharia. So are you saying that they just need to understand what their teacher tells them and just copy and paste what's been said?
No,
or do you think that this is something that in the madrasa system that we fail in a lot, that we're not producing students who qualify and are able to critically think for themselves, whereas
the biggest
university
thing is,
system,
the difference between the university system and the Darul Uloom system in the UK is that universities have a benchmark across the country. You have to meet certain expectations, otherwise you can't really be a university, right? In Darul Ulooms and Alim courses and things, you can have a major Darul Uloom in 5 or 6 of them in large cities, and you can have an Alim course, at the top of your corner shop. Yeah, naturally they're going to produce very different results. So we can't really make generalized statements as though our students who graduate from these places do these, or they don't really have these types of skills or something.
I'm saying it from the point of view. The reason I'm saying it, I'm saying as the point of view as someone who is a director of studies at Sufa for now almost 10 years. And I've actually seen this with people.
I'm with you. I think that we need to unpack before we try to give an answer here. So when we were saying like somebody who's a senior scholar of the country and somebody who's a fresh graduate, they're equated on par with one another, but they're equated by who? So sometimes from the layman's perspective, now laymen obviously come in different categories. You're going to have intelligent ones. You're going to have slower ones. You're going to have people who are more practicing, less practicing, more aware of the Sharia, less aware of the Sharia. So let's say a standard 14-year-old, who's just messing around in school and just doesn't really come from a practicing family, is probably working in his uncle's restaurant selling alcohol or something. Yeah. Now, from his perspective, somebody who graduates from a Darul Uloom and somebody who's a senior scholar, there won't be any difference between them, because the kind of needs he has, the kind of question he or she has, right? That graduate should have more than enough competency to answer his questions, to cater for his needs, and all of these types of things. Whereas if somebody's a lot more intelligent, somebody's been they've been practicing, they've been researching, they've been learning a lot more, they've been traveling around and getting a lot more exposure, then from their perspective they'll have a lot more nuance. They think, hold on a minute, a normal graduate, an advanced graduate, and you have older graduates, because I think at the same time age doesn't really necessarily mean knowledge here.
Let's look at it this way then.
Hold on a minute. Just because somebody's in their 40s or 50s doesn't necessarily mean they're more knowledgeable than somebody in their 20s or 30s. Not necessarily. And just because 2 people graduate from the same Darul Uloom at the age of 22, for example, it doesn't mean that those 2 are of the same intellectual ability, same academic ability, same life experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So somebody who's grown up in a religious environment and has been protected from the outside, protected as in inverted commas, because it's not really protection. Their exposure or the way they interact with the world will be very different from those of us who grew outside of that, and we had to make sense of the world for ourselves. We had to do that. So then our mindset would be very different, our attitude would be very different, and our competence would be very different as well. Your academic...
I understand that. What I'm saying is, look, if you have a 6 years course in a madrasa, you got a student graduating who still believes that sitting on the floor is a religious obligation, right? What I'm saying is there needs to be a minimum criteria for there to be critical thinking. So you're saying, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that we're not going to treat everyone the same. But I'm saying is from a layman's perspective. I don't know, Naveed, how your mind has changed with your experience with seeing different types of scholars. Altaf, definitely, I know yours.
I agree with you here, by the way. So this is the point I was coming to.
So maybe Altaf and Naveed can interject here.
This is basically the Quranic approach of this falls into the philosophy of education. So what does the Quran tell us about learning? What's the point of it? What's the method of it? What's the highlight? What's the hallmark of it? What we find in the Quran is the Quran tells us so many times, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا تَتَدَبَّرُونَ أَفَلَا يَذَّكَّرُونَ. Do you not ponder? Do you not use your intellect? Do you not think? Do you not reflect? The Quran tells us this all the time. So you have to be a critical thinker. The Quran actually encourages us to be critical thinkers. So you know how some places they say, oh, you should never ask a question to your teacher, you should never disagree. Whatever we say, we've had years of experience, and we're blessing you with knowledge. You're an empty vessel, and we're filling you with information or knowledge. Well, that's not really the Quranic way, and that's not the prophetic way either. There's a book here actually, Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah. He's got Rasul Mu'allim wa Asalibuhu fi Ta'lim, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So in here you'll have certain types of pedagogies. You'll have the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam using this method, or this is how he engaged with his students. This is how he engaged with the Sahaba. This is how he raised their critical thinking. This is how he got them to think. For example, by using riddles. One time the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to his companions, إِنَّ مِنَ الشَّجَرِ شَجَرَةً لَا يَسْقُطُ وَرَقُهَا مَثَلُهَا كَمَثَلِ الْمُسْلِمِ فَحَدِّثُونِ مَا هِيَ. There is a tree among the trees, in the woods, whose لا يسقط ورقها, its leaves do not fall. مثلها كمثل المسلم. The example of it, or the parable of it, is like that of a believer, of a Muslim. فَحَدِّثُونِ مَا هِيَ. So tell me, what is it? So this is a brain teaser. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is using a brain teaser to get them to think. And you find Ibrahim alayhi salam, what did he do? He asked his father questions. Why do you worship something that doesn't benefit you or harm you? Why do you worship something that doesn't, it can't see you or hear you? It can't answer your calls. Why do you worship something that you've carved out of your own hands? You've carved out of stone with your own hands. How can you worship something like this? So he's engaging with them critically. We see the same thing with Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. You see the same things with Lut alayhi salam. Lut alayhi salam is something very, very important in our context as well. He's engaged with everybody critically. This is something you find across the board, across all the prophets alayhi salatu wasalam. You're going to find it everywhere, that they were not only were they critical thinkers, but the way they taught and educated the people wasn't a top-down effect of instructing them and trying to indoctrinate.
Okay, so why do you think this we've kind of lost this then? So you've studied in university, or your sister in university, and you've clearly seen a difference between the approaches, and you've seen benefits on both sides. So why do you think that there is this? Why is there a need for now students to have to go to like a university after they graduate? So for example, at Sufa Institute now, alhamdulillah, this year we've managed to have affiliation with Markfield. So our graduates can actually graduate with a degree qualification now. So it's like, how comes this is something that the Madrasah system didn't inculcate? Because a lot of people I've spoken to who go to university, they've said to me, after doing Madrasah, we found that the university gives you like research skills. It gives you the ability to be able to think outside the box, to be able to question certain things.
It completely depends on it. Like in England, I've seen plenty of people within Darul Ulooms who can think critically, who can actually engage, who can think outside the box. But a lot of places don't let that happen. So it's to each individual learner. Do you engage critically or do you not? Do you start thinking and questioning or do you not? Like sometimes those who are naturally inquisitive and you ask a lot of questions, you want to learn more, you want to dig deeper, you can get told off by your teachers. It happens. Like, stop asking too many questions. Who are you? You shouldn't be asking these types of things. So that does happen. But then some people would, under fear, they'll stop that, and other people would carry on that. And you find this from was it Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, or somebody, one of the companions radiallahu anhum, or was it Mujahid rahimahullah? Somebody said, it's reported in Sahih al-Bukhari, that لا ينال العلم اثنان مستكبر ومستحي. So two people will never attain knowledge. One is the arrogant, and one of them is the overly humble, or somebody who's too shy. So if you don't, the one who's too shy will never ask questions, because you might get scared, you might think people are going to laugh at you, your teacher's going to shout at you, or whatever. But look, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, حُسْنُ السُّؤَالِ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ, asking a good question. So good question tells you it needs to be critically thought out.
So are you saying that the university system is more close to the Sunnah way?
I'm not saying that.
Salaf way.
University
critical
system,
thinking.
University system is not the same. It's not monolithic, as in the same way that in Darul Ulooms, I don't like when people think that Darul Ulooms are not critical, they're not like this, because it's different. Different people come out with different abilities, and different graduates would have different approaches to their learning. And the same thing would happen at university. So some students are only in there just to get a degree, just to pass it. There might be drinking and going to parties and things the whole way, and just pass their exams and do their coursework and just get out with a degree. You get people like that. So just because somebody's been to university, I've seen tons of people going to graduate from university, but how many of them are actually critical thinkers? How many of them can apply the research skills that they learned into the real world, into day-to-day life? They can't. A lot of people can't. So intelligent people among non-intelligent people have always been a minority, and you get that everywhere. You're going to get that within the religious circles. You're going to get that within the secular circles. So, for example, you get some teachers in Darul Ulooms who will only teach you from the hashia, from the footnotes, from the they'll just basically read that and just regurgitate it to you, without really engaging with it, without reflecting on it, without having their own analysis on it. Yeah. At the same time, you're going to have others who have their own material, who have their own content. They link it to modern day, what's going on in the politics now, what's going on in terms of the da'wah, atheism, feminism, all these types of things, and they will link everything together. And some students won't like that, some students would like that, some students would prefer the other way. It's just human beings are human beings. And this is what in education, they call this individual differences, or al-furuq al-fardiyya in Arabic, al-furuq al-fardiyya. So now in the universities, you have the same thing. So some teachers would basically just have a PowerPoint presentation, write everything on there, maybe have some notes, and they just read through the notes and just read through all of that, and they don't really discuss with you all these types of things. Other lecturers would actually sit there and engage with you and discuss with you, ask you questions, and make you engage. So, and students, like in university, you don't need to even show up. You could just go get a coffee and you can't be bothered. If you don't want to turn up, you don't need to turn up. You just need, as long as you meet like 70% of your attendance or something, it's fine. So we can't really have this binary way of thinking that Darul Ulooms are not critical, but universities are critical, because that's not always the case. Like you look at.
So are you saying it's more to do with rather than the system of the madrasa and the university, it's more to do with the individual teachers and their own personal pedagogy?
Yeah, because it's both actually. It's both, because if there's too many individuals with the same mindset, obviously that's going to affect the system, isn't it? But generally, yeah, it's the community is not a community without individuals. It's the individuals together who make a community, who make a society, right? So now, like, let's look at what happens within the university system, or not university system. Let's look at university graduates, standard, typical university graduate. Yeah, there's a certain type of political mindset they have. There's a certain type of scientific views they have. There's a certain type of views about religion they have. Yeah, why is that the case? Why do you hardly get people on the complete other side? Like you'll get people who say, separation of the church and state, separation of church and state. So they think Islam is like Christianity as well. So it's like, oh, no, hold on a minute. Your religion should be a private thing between you and God, and that's it. It shouldn't, it shouldn't affect day-to-day life with everything else. Why do the majority of university students and graduates think like that? In terms of politically as well, economically, the whole, capitalism, socialism, Marxism, all these kind of things, all these isms. Why are the bulk on one side of it? And I'm not saying they should be on the other side. I'm saying, why are they not critically engaging with it in a way that is the nuance in what they're talking about? Why are they parroting what everybody else is saying? Why is that the case? Do you get me? So just because somebody's in university and just because it's Western, just because it's fancy, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're critical thinkers. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the teachers are critical thinkers either. Yes, the university is supposed to be a safe space for lecturers to be able to say what they want, and for students to be able to ask what they want, say what they want, research what they want, and document their research in a way.
So do you think that university has actually allowed you to be able to rethink your own or refine your own sort of understanding of your identity as a Muslim that you wouldn't have got if you didn't go to university?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. In theory, yes, that's what they're supposed to do. But in practice, does that necessarily happen? No. But again, it depends on who you are. Like some people might go to madrasa and change and become somebody. Have one type of identity. They might go to university and just completely change afterwards. So, I've seen people who, they've gone to Darul Uloom and stuff. Afterwards, when they're in university, or they've gone to university and they've come out, all they ever talk about is, this academic and that academic and this publication and that publication. But then why do you never cite, Arabic publication? Why do you never cite any of this anymore? Why can you never talk about the Turath? How can you link modern day theories that you've learned with, by rethinking what you've done in the tradition. A lot of people can't do that. So just because somebody's gone to university and they've gone to Darul Uloom, it doesn't mean that they've successfully blended the two together. It does not mean that. So some people can go to university and remain, keep their identity. They can go to Darul Uloom and keep the identity that they had. So you could go to Darul Uloom and think, okay, I'm not going to get involved with the cultural side of things. I'm going to learn what Islam tells me to do. I'm going to practice upon that, and I'm going to dedicate myself to that. And then once you go to university, you might think, hold on a minute, my values are my values, the qiyam al-Islamiyya that I'm going to live by, adhere to. Once you go to university, you don't drop those. You don't just go to university and think, you know what, there's girls in the class. Let me go take the numbers and stuff. Oh, there's no Muslims in my class. Let me go there and, let me try a sip of alcohol and see what it's like. You don't do that. If somebody were to do that, then of course, it shows that you didn't have your values, you don't have substance to begin with. So this is the problem I have with the preservation mindset. So those who want to protect their children or they protect the students from the world around them, what really happens is you just hide them and you don't give them any exposure, that they don't build any qualities within them. Whereas if you've been thrown out there and then if you've been thrown out there and you haven't got any values, then of course you're just going to assimilate. But if you've been given the values, if you've learned about the values, and if you've thought for yourself and you hold your own opinions, you hold your own values, these things mean something to me, and I'm going to live by this, I'm going to die by this. It doesn't matter what environment you're going to get into. You're going to have disagreements with people, sure, but you're going to go there and you're going to keep your same values. And this is the problem that I think a lot of people haven't done successfully, whether it's in the Darul Uloom context, whether it's in the university context. They haven't successfully, even those who claim, we're teaching them adab and akhlaq and character and whatever, you haven't really instilled within them the values of tawheed, of sunnah, of adherence of God, living in a God-centric way where Allah is at the center of my life and everything stems around that. If you haven't, instilled that, or if a person hasn't gained that, you don't even need to go to university. You can just, work in a restaurant and get messed up. Do you know what I mean? You can go to restaurants. It's not like, restaurants are perfect. There's perfect people hanging around there. There's, it's not like there's angels working there. We know what kind of things these restaurant workers are getting up to. We know a lot of these elders are.
No offense to all restaurant workers, my friends out there. Some of them. Yes.
I'm saying, there are a lot of people. They go to Betfred and they gamble on horses and whatnot. They'll come home late and do all sorts of things that they shouldn't be doing. We know they do that. Let's be honest about it. Yeah. But,
okay, someone's asked a good question here. Does the Darul Uloom prepare you for the outside world?
Let's get to that. So this is the point here, that it's the values that are supposed to be instilled within you. Do you gain them or not? Do you have enough knowledge to have confidence or not? Do you have enough knowledge, and have you internalized that knowledge? Have you internalized the philosophy of everything that you're supposed to be thinking about? If you haven't done that, then you might start gambling if you go to a restaurant. You might start, drink alcohol if you go to university. You might start doing silly things if you, even within Darul Uloom, you might try to, go behind and smoke a cigarette somewhere, jump over, go to a cinema.
So would you say that's more to do with the parents' upbringing, or would you say that's...
It's everything, isn't it? It's education. That's what I'm saying. So there's people who have the role of an educator, which parents have a role in that, society has a role in that, teachers have a role in that. Everything. All your elders and people who are supposed to care about you, they're supposed to have a role in that. So in Bengali, for example, we use the Arabic word morabbi. The Arabic word morabbi means educator, somebody who raises you. And in Bengali, we say murabbi meaning an elder. So the reason being that all these elders are basically raising us, they're educating us, because it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just one or two people who raise a child, the whole community raises the child. So educators can come in various forms. Now, if they failed in that, that's one part. But the learner themselves, whether you're a child in terms of your parent-to-child relationship, or whether that's a student in terms of formal institution.
Molana, you've left these two quiet with your bayan, mashallah.
But there's more to it. Like you have some spiritual contexts. Like in a spiritual retreat, a lot of people go on retreats and they have a group. And there's like a leader there, and they try to learn the akhlaq and character also. They do a lot of dhikr and stuff like that.
Jazakallah khair, Molana. Just one last thing before we wrap up. I think it's a very good thing you're talking about. Maybe we can bring you on, inshallah, in future podcasts, inshallah, where we could talk more about what you're talking about.
I've got a question for Molana.
Yeah.
So Molana, you've spoken a lot about kind of like how how you're looking at education from a holistic kind of a perspective, where you're looking at all the different factors that affect an individual's journey when they're going through an educational process, be it a Darul Uloom, be it a school, or be it a university. Sorry, so you look at all of those different ways that affects them. I think the question for me, and I think a couple of people have asked it as well, is that what is the expectation? And this is for Mufti Saab as well. What is the expectation for the community, for somebody who comes out of Darul Uloom? Like, what should we expect?
I think I've answered
A
that earlier.
student, a scholar, somebody
should
to
have-
follow.
Somebody, well,
And are they trained for that as well? Are they trained for that as well? That responsibility.
Are you going to just ask questions, or are you going to let me answer as well?
Molana, you've spoken for
I
about
think you-
Molana, you've spoken for about an hour,
You've
man.
spoken quite long.
I can ask 3 questions in a row.
I'll ask you questions, but of course, let me answer as well. So it depends from the community's perspective, from the normal people. What should they expect from a Darul Uloom graduate or somebody who comes from a Darul Uloom? I think fundamentally they should expect somebody who's familiar with accessing the tradition, as in they know Arabic and they've studied the Quran, they've studied the Hadith, and they have engaged with that enough to have a confidence within themselves, and they can nurture others as well. Yeah. So that doesn't necessarily mean, help them in their marital affairs or help them in their businesses and all that kind of thing. But at least if something, in terms of belief in God, belief in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all these foundational things, they should be fully equipped with that. And any matter that's directly religious, if it's directly theological, they should be more than equipped and looked at as a learned person within that, not necessarily a world-class specialist.
So okay, so I mean, here I would disagree here. The reason is because I think a lot of people assume, the expectation for a lot of people is that a Molana can run a country, a Molana can,
That's not the question. That wasn't the question. The question wasn't what
expectation. I mean, going back to what you were saying about expectation.
What should they expect? Not what do they expect?
So a lot of people have the expectation.
A lot of people have the expectation
of this kind of thing, and I've heard the reason is because I've heard scholars on the minbar say you should go to your Molana for everything in the deen.
Yeah,
everything
okay.
you should go for, and so the expectation is kind of put out there that, you know what, Molana, you should, when it comes to like moon sighting, go to the Molana. When it comes to marriage, you go to the Molana. When it comes to like how to deal with LGBTQ, you go to the Molana. When it comes to, so it's like this is the expectation that even many Molanas have put onto the public, pressured the public into kind of assuming that, look, this is how you should see the Molanas. But what you're saying is correct. I don't disagree with what you're saying. That the fundamental expectation of someone studying a madrasa is all it is. And I don't want to say in a crude way. The graduate is simply a preserver of the tradition. That's all he is. He doesn't have any other skill from a madrasa unless on the side he learns how to give talks, unless on the side he learns how to do nikahs, unless on the side he learns how to be a chaplain or anything like that. That's a side thing that they learn. But the madrasa's fundamental is simply a preserver of the tradition in the best manner possible. That's all it is.
We can't talk about all madrasa in the same way. Like
no, what I'm saying is, the question was to both of us. Yeah, the question was to both of us. So that, I think,
what should people expect, not what do they expect.
So the
madrasa unrealistic expectations. They have the same expectations from English teachers as well. You think, you're an English teacher.
I don't think English teachers are I disagree with this point because what you're saying. What you're saying, well, no offense. This is no offense. I mean, this is just like an open conversation because people do have these kind of questions. What I'm saying is that many Molanas do make the public feel as though if you haven't done mashwara with an alim about something, then you're not really going to be getting the right answer. You'll go astray, basically.
Yeah, so people might be doing, inappropriate things and whatnot. I think what's the point of this discussion? Are we just going to be armchair critics and just highlight all the flaws and not talk about any solutions here? I think that's not really the right way.
Molana, I'll come out with the solution. The solution is about setting the expectation in the correct manner so that scholars are reinforcing that. And I will tell you about this from my experience as a layperson, right? Who's had about 15 years of working with scholars who've come fresh out of Darul Ulooms all across the UK. And I've been blessed with that as well. One of the things that comes is that they have this expectation upon themselves when they come out the Darul Uloom that they should firstly be respected, right, as scholars, that they should be people that are kind of like held in esteem, right? Thirdly, that they are people that should be referred to in instances of difficulty and that they will have answers. And I think what I was kind of alluding to is the fact that they don't have this skill set, and nor is it developed in a Darul Uloom system.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why we shouldn't have those unhealthy expectations on young graduates, and we should
And
allow them
we're
to
saying the same
develop.
thing here. We're saying the same thing here. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. It's just you guys are going on a rant here about, all downloads are, bad, all these graduates are bad, and people.
No. Sorry, Molana. I don't know where you based that from. I've not said that at all.
I know.
I don't suppose this has as well from this conversation. I think what we're getting to is the fact of the point that I've heard, and I've been listening quite a bit throughout this conversation, is that when it comes to Darul Ulooms, what you've been saying is that it's about the individual, and it is about the individual's experience from like an interpretivist framework, you can almost put it into, right? Where they go through they have many influences on them. Their teachers will have many influences on them. Their own journeys are going to be very individualistic. It's very difficult to tar everybody's experience under the same brush. I totally accept that and get that. I totally respect that as well. But what I'm saying to you is that I think kind of like the skill set that you get from a Darul Uloom, or at least the people that I've interacted with, I don't feel that they had the necessary skills and experiences just from the Darul Uloom experience to serve the community in any facet that would be meaningful. In terms of apart from teaching.
Sure, we're saying exactly the same thing here. And this is what I said. The expectation that they should have is not that they start solving people's marriage problems or their political problems or their financial problems or things like that. The only expectation that people should have from a Darul Uloom graduate is that they should be competent they should know Arabic. They can access the Quran, they can access the Hadith, they can access the bulk of the scholarship. Whether they've been through the scholarship or not is a different story, but they can access it as per need, as per necessity, and they can help or answer people's questions and guide them in matters related to religion itself. That's it. That's all I'm saying. So the expectation that I'm not saying that people have these expectations and Darul Uloom graduates are failing those expectations, because they shouldn't need to meet those expectations. If you're going to want somebody who's is a therapist as well, then obviously you should send them to a psychology course or something. If you want somebody to be an economist as well, send them to learn to study economics. What I'm saying is the expectation that they should have is only academic and spiritual and religious. That's it. So anything that's secular or anything that's not necessarily religious or something that's from the culture, that's something that's from anything else, is not.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with.
So it's not going around and talking about stuff like these are the expectations people do have. I'm saying that the expectations that people should have should be a lot lower. Not necessarily lower, it should be a lot
And
more.
I think it goes back to what you were saying, Molana, about the transparency. I think Molanas, people who are involved in madrasas and represent madrasas, need to be much more clear with the audience about where they need to actually go to get the problem solved.
Yeah, exactly.
And someone mentioned on the chat, they said regarding as soon as COVID-19 happened, I mean, to be honest, the madrasas didn't know what to do. Like no one knew what to do. But the problem was you had Molana individuals who were giving their own solutions to medical problems.
Yeah.
And this was a lack. This was showing the lack of competence of them in that particular field. This wasn't their field.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you kind of like look at this, for example, in a country that's predominantly Muslim, like Pakistan, for example, where people look down upon the Maulvi, sort of like the Maulvi community, right? They have this mindset of the Maulvi and they look down upon. I was there for 9 years, I know. And one of the reasons is because sometimes what tends to happen is you get this kind of the Molana speaking out of his lane. Right. And Molana Yusuf Banuri himself, he said, the problem we have today is we have two groups of people out there. We have the graduates and we have those working in the secular, area. Because what we have to do is merge the two. They need to bridge the two together, work together. And people need to see this, like people need to see Molanas and people who are working in secular environment. Like Mufti Taqi Usmani does this very well. You'll see him working with people who from the outside, they don't look very sort of like, from in a Pakistan sort of mindset, they don't look very Molana-ish, right? But they might be well qualified in finance, very qualified in a particular field. And I think in the UK, this is something that we need to see as well. We need to see, for example, like Molanas, having this kind of like platform with people out there who might have graduated from, like, in France, they've got that chateau where people study. And I know many of my friends who actually studied there and who are very competent scholars in their field. Or they've studied in Azhar, or they've studied in other places. And I think if everyone can understand where they need to work and their lanes, I think that will be a very good way of expectation and transparency as well.
Yes, exactly, and this is exactly what we need. Like, pinpoint everything. Like, what is our objective in learning? What is our objective in education? What's the point of going to a Darul Uloom? What's the point of going to a university? What's not the point in that? What's not the point of going to a Darul Uloom? And what's not the point of going to a university? What's not the point in something else? So once everything is clear, then you can only make that clear once you actively promote that, whether you say that or.
Okay, before we actually let Molana go, just one question, Molana. What would you advise to people who are thinking of, first of all, making a decision of going to university after graduation? What would your advice be to them?
My advice,
because I mean, like, sometimes you hear, you shouldn't go to university. University is gonna mess up your iman,
Yeah.
and with all the kind of fees and everything, it's best not to go to university. What would you say?
I think in terms of the Iman thing, I think we're a few generations. We've passed a few generations for that. That stuff happened in the 1900s and whatnot, and probably in the 80s and 90s and things. I think the advice that I generally give people is, take a break first. As in, after Darul Uloom, just get into the real world, do things, expose yourself to different types of people, read a lot more. Read a lot more English things, because you've had a lot more. Most of the things that you've been reading would be in Arabic or in Urdu or something else. Read English and see how it works. Look at publications and gain some writing skills before you go to university. Otherwise, some people who come straight from Darul Uloom and go straight to university, then they will struggle a lot. Not necessarily in the academic side and on the intellectual level, but in terms of the writing. If you're going to have like a 5,000 word essay to write, but you're not really competent, or you've not really had exposure into academic writing, especially on that same level, it's not really appropriate for somebody like that to be at university. So if they do want to go to university, they should have an objective behind it. Why do they want to go? What do they want to gain from it? And I would say have a couple of years, at least about 2 years, and be on the ground before that. Unless, of course, they've been to some kind of hybrid institution, a place that possibly teaches in English, a place that introduces essay writing, it's got research skills. And we have a couple of these hybrid institutions within the UK as well. Students from there, I've seen, they tend to be competent enough to go straight to university, and they don't really struggle as much. If anything, they'll just tweak here and there, and they'll gain the skills that they need to gain over there. But yeah, I don't really think I don't really think it's appropriate for every Darul Uloom graduate to go to university. And of those who do go, I don't think they should go straight away, especially if they haven't had that kind of a background first.
Jazakallah khair, Molana, for coming on. I do apologize, Molana, if I did sound a bit abrupt.
No, it's not yourself. No.
Yeah, so maaf.
Molana, your tips at the end were really, really good, mashallah.
But guys, if you guys don't know, me and Molana are very, very good friends, yeah. Molana wrote his name on the board in our classroom, yeah. Since that day, we become very good friends. Yeah, so Jazakallah khair, Molana, for coming on. Is there any last piece of advice that you want to give to our audience?
Not necessarily. I think, if anything, I'd leave you with, try to read and learn and think for yourself. I'll leave you with one ayah of the Quran, actually, where it's one of my favorite verses, where the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to tell people, إِنَّمَا أَعِيذُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ, I'll give you one advice. So you rise up for Allah in pairs or individually, and you think, ponder. So if you're in a crowd, obviously you're going to the crowd mindset, group thinking take over you. You're not going to have a critical mind. But if you're in pairs, then you can have good discussions, critical discussions. Or if you're individually, you're thinking and you're reflecting and pondering over life, pondering over the deep questions, then you can have a bit of confidence and have your own thoughts and have your own authentic being. I think that's what the Quran actually tells us to do. That's the ideal philosophy of education that we find within the Quran. So I think become a critical thinker and do that by thinking a lot.
Jazakallah khair, Molana. Inshallah, we will love to have you back, inshallah, sometime. We'll have another, inshallah, in the future, another topic.
Soon, inshallah.
Because Molana is also involved in Maktab syllabi as well. Am I right?
Yeah.
So, inshallah, I think in the future, it would be good to bring Molana in to discuss regarding Maktab syllabus. Jazakallah khair, Molana. So, inshallah, we'll see you next time.
Definitely.
Molana, your tips that you gave right at the end, you should write them up in a blog. scholars going to study onto university and taking time out and reading and stuff. I think
And
that's really
that's
helpful.
an eye-opener for me. I mean, it's good.
That's
Yeah,
really
like you said.
helpful.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people will benefit from that. Jazakallah khair. So, mashallah, alhamdulillah, we had Molana on, and I think, we will definitely have, I think, a variety of different guests coming on. Yeah, guests that can make Naveed quiet. Allahu Akbar. The guest that can make Naveed. So many people were saying in the comments, how come Naveed muted? Unmute him. Brothers and sisters out there, I do not have the power to unmute Naveed.
Nav's lost
Only
his
Allah
voice. That's
subhanahu
what
wa ta'ala will unmute him. Yeah, and
Nav's lost his voice.
This is, I'm the first one to say, when I don't know too much about a topic, I'll put my hands up and say, yeah, you know what, I'll let you lot carry on. Altaf has obviously had a lot more experience in dealing with people that have graduated and working with them in a capacity. And I've worked with him in an organization where we've had to approach a lot of people from different schools of thought, different religious backgrounds. And the only thing I will say, I've met people that have graduated from different places, from different countries, and as a layman, I've seen the different impact that it's had on their thinking and critical thinking. Someone from Al-Azhar will think slightly different from a Medinan graduate. Even someone from Saudi Arabia, the Medinan students are not necessarily the same as the students that graduate from a university in Riyadh. So I've seen it, but not at such a critical scale where I can differentiate, accurately between them. But I know that there is a massive difference. Same thing with people that have graduated in the UK. It just depends how, like the Sheikh said, it depends on the person, his individual learning capability as well. But I think some people in general, they'll, how can I say this without offending anyone? I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any way. I think for some people, they need to basically be a bit more exposed in order to apply what they've learned, contextualize what they've learned to benefit society. And I think for that to happen, sometimes you do need to, like Altaf says, is go outside your comfort zone a bit. And you might have graduated, you might have got this, you might have got that, but there's always more to learn. Whether they've come from a madrasah, whether they've come from a university, the people that have the most benefit and I think that have the most impact on the community are the people that carry on studying. So whether you've graduated in a madrasah or Darul Uloom, even in a university, if you carry on studying after you've gained this qualification, I think those are the people that normally benefit the community the most. That's all I have to say about it.
What do you see in a scholar? Like when you see a scholar, what gives that scholar value to you?
To me,
because you've got lots of experience with now different types of scholars, and you've kind of seen behind the curtains what scholars are like, and you've seen them in public on platforms, and you've seen them, in different lights. So what in a scholar, if you would say, what were the things that would really shine in a scholar for you that you would take him seriously, or due to
Consistency.
Consistency, that's definitely key.
Consistency in what way? In
Consistency in knowing his characteristics. So I you get the stage imam, and that's wicked. And you get behind the scenes imam as well. As long as that there's not too much of a difference. I'm laughing at that because me and Nav know one guy who's got a massive disparity there. He's Bear Shalom online and he's even more Bear Shalom offline. But in terms of they're consistent in terms of their way that they conduct themselves and their characteristics. Not in the fact that they're the stage imam offline as well. They've got to chill and relax, but they just have a consistent character and their akhlaq is consistent as well. So what you see on the member from them in terms of personality and persona, it's the same thing that you get from them in those one-to-one expectations. They're not trying to be an angel on stage and an angel off stage. They're just trying to be themselves and trying to figure it out.
Interesting. So what category would you put Naveed in?
Nav is the most inconsistent guy in the world. He's probably the most pious guy ever.
Allahu Akbar.
No. Nav's one of those people that what you see is what you get.
Alhamdulillah. To be fair, I think everybody generally people have changed the way that they see the system. I think Altaf you raised a valid point. Is when you're around people that have studied for quite a long time, and you put them in situations that they're usually not used to, then you start seeing areas of it that need improvement, which applies to us guys that are not studied or not gone to a Darul Uloom or anything like that. There's always more to learn, isn't there? And if you've got both, like if you've got the madrasa degree, the madrasa qualification, and you've got the university degree, it can only benefit you, like if you're striving for knowledge, you're gonna want to get it from wherever you can get it from.
Yeah, I think.
And
I think
one thing with Mufti Sahib,
I think this is a very sort of like sensitive topic for a lot of people, because there are going to be people who are going to become a bit like defensive, right? They're going to feel that insecurities in some areas, because you're talking about like a sort of like a tradition, which people feel that they have to sort of stand up for, they have to justify. But the problem is, I think a few people were mentioning in the comments as well, there's no sort of like overarching body that's monitoring all the system, right? And that's where we as Muslims, we tend to kind of this is what we should be doing, but we tend to lack in, which is taking ourselves to account when it comes to our education system, when it comes to our masjids, when it comes to other sort of areas where public is involved, right? Whether it's charity organization, whether it's maktabs, anything like that. There needs to be like overarching bodies that need to take people to account, like Altaf was mentioning a few podcasts ago. And I think
Mufti Sahib, before you carry on, you mentioned about what I think is a good scholar. It doesn't really answer your question, but I wanted to say that some people, they need that guy to dress up with the Arab attire and give them constant motivational reminders and stuff like that, and that's what they need. Other people need the more academic side, because they've gone past that motivational speech kind of stage where they need answers that are not normally answered by their standard Darul Uloom teacher. So there's room for both. Some of the most, what can I say, the most clued up and the most academic people within their science in this country don't actually wear thobe. I'm not gonna, as a Muslim, I'm not gonna discredit them because they don't fit that system or they don't fit that appearance that I've been led to believe that that's part of Islam, if you know what I mean.
So I mean, okay, so is that because, would you say that's because your own upbringing, your own sort of like, because you're not really from like a conservative, sort of like upbringing? Yeah. Am I right?
Well,
or are you liberal?
Our parents, they follow a basic Islam.
Musab, can I just quickly say something? I know there's people on the comments that kind of like talking about Molana and stuff. We're not speaking about Molana at this moment in time, because Molana made some really valid points as well. So if you're commenting about that, please just kind of like leave it for someone else.
I agree. I think, I think guys, we have to have respect for any guest that we bring on.
Of course.
And ultimately, we need to kind of show people that we're able to be to listen as well. I think that's the main thing.
Of course.
So having a podcast and bringing on people that just conform with what we like, right? Whatever I like, whatever Naveed likes, whatever Altaf likes. There's no point to the podcast then. It's just going to be, we're just adding a fourth date basically. Yeah. So it's not about having people that are going to be like-minded. We want to bring people on who have different views, and that's the whole idea of opening the horizons to people. So you can see in the UK, what do we have in the UK?
Yeah. Nothing that I said is aimed at Molana, just to clarify. I think Altaf makes a very valid point there. I'm just talking about generally from a layman's perspective, like what Mufti Sahib asked me, and this is what we see. And like I said, like we've been around scholars for long enough to know that people are human at the end of the day. Everybody has their opinion. Everybody has their, I'm not going to call it cultural baggage, but their social baggage that they carry with them. They're going to base perceptions and stuff like that. So everybody's different. Everybody's entitled to their view, and everybody brings everybody in the podcast has more valid points to the table other than myself.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I totally agree with what you're saying there. We have to kind of like, we're going to have to bring people on in the future, inshallah, who might be very, very conservative on certain issues.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know Molana very well, and Molana is not conservative. Yeah, trust me, I know him very, very well. But the thing is, I think maybe because Altaf's ultra conservative, Altaf's like ultra orthodox, like ultra orthodox Hanafi.
I was so ultra orthodox. It's unbelievable. Now, I think the thing was that I think people in the comments are just kind of like going off, and that's why I just wanted to mention that because I think it's unfair. Then, I like the thing about Darul Ulooms, I think, and universities and studying at both of those is that you've seen students go through both. And when we were at university, we managed to see students that was studying as well. And for us at university, that was really comforting because they were able to kind of like understand our context and also kind of give us advice according to that. And generally, like when we were talking about kind of like, scholars coming out open-minded and stuff, I would say, Molana, I'd be controversial enough, but I'm not going to do it today. I'll probably do it next week. Is that you can actually go through the Darul Ulooms in the UK, and you can create caricatures of the type of characteristics a student may have coming out of those Darul Ulooms. And I don't think you'd be too far off. Nav, what do you reckon?
What's my character?
You're from Pakistan. You've told us about your caricature. You were just
when you say caricature, I think of those guys who sit in town and will draw your image with a big bloated head, small body.
Spitting image type. Sab, you've told us your caricature. You were just a modern day Imam Ghazali from Lozals.
Allah.
I think
he's from Lozals.
Of Pakistan, who went on a journey.
I'm trying to think of a poem here, guys. He's from Lozals, and he doesn't do cells.
Now, what do you reckon?
Sorry, what was that?
What do you reckon about the thing that you can tell when you know a graduate's come from somewhere, the type of temperament they might have and the type of temperament they might have when it comes to their faith?
I suppose there are going to be similarities, and just like any other place, like if we know that certain people belong to a certain university, they might feel that university is like the cream of the crop, and they're gonna not have arrogance, but they're gonna feel that their education and the way they've been taught is better and superior to everybody else and every other university.
Definitely.
And
definitely from universities.
Yeah, and I think there's many factors to it, and like Mufti Saab said, it's always nice to get other people's views. And again, somebody that's been through the system is going to think differently to somebody that's not been in the system, because there's going to be a lot of people who are probably watching thinking that, like, our opinion's irrelevant because we've not been through the system. But I just want to let everyone know, like, we respect the differences of opinion in general. Like, if somebody's brought a point, me and Altaf might not agree just because we've not been through the system, but this is why we're asking these questions. We understand, and the people that are watching the podcast, they understand. And be respectful in the comments, guys. I'll try not to laugh, because you guys say some funny stuff. Take Nav off mute, this, that. People are killing me off.
I think the thing is, when it comes to Darul Ulooms, that's the only reason I asked the question about kind of what should we expect from the communities, because that's what we see. That's our interaction. That's our interface.
Yeah.
So our interface with the scholar is that he goes away for 6 years. A guy in your community goes away for 6 years. You see him in the summer holidays, see him in Ramadan. They come back after 6 years, and now he's Molana. You can't even use his first name to call him anymore. You got to call him Molana.
Liaquat? You called me Liaquat? Astaghfirullah.
Well, I'll call you worse.
Disgraced.
I'll call you worse than that of this one.
I remember someone called someone bro first time.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to stuff like that, then you see this person that now he's the Molana, and you're like, okay, so what is this? Like, what's his, like in X-Men or like Marvel? Like, what's his superpower? And what does he do? And you're trying to understand that, and that scholars trying to understand the same thing. And he's trying to figure out. He's come back into the world full time now. And he's got to kind of find out where his feet are. He's got to get over this whole marriage kind of conversation. He's got to make a living.
Pass his driving test.
Pass his driving test, his theory, whatever he's got to do. He's got all of these pressures on him. And we're expecting great stuff from them as well. So I think that's the unfair part, is that we should just probably just call them by their first name still.
Yeah.
until they get to that stage where they're comfortable being that Molana.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Like, in Pakistan, for example, some madrasah, the new graduates, they don't call them like Molana. They call them like Molvi. So it was like, what I found was that the term Molvi, like my teacher, if he saw one of his students has graduated and he's teaching in the same institute as my teacher, the teacher would call his like ex-student, former student, he'd call him a Molvi. So it was like this kind of thing that, you know what, you haven't reached that level yet, right? You're still like, wet behind the ears.
Yeah.
So you're like at the level of Molvi. So it was like this little kind of like banter they used to have that, when you get our level, then you're going to be like Molana. And in fact, it's interesting in Pakistan, like the term Mufti in certain madrasas is only reserved for a few individuals in that institute. No one else is called a Mufti, even if they graduate from the Iftar course. They don't even call them that.
Yeah.
And I think what Altaf is saying is correct. But how do you balance this then? Like, how do you kind of like turn around and you say to the Imam one day, yo, Hassan,
Look, if he's the Imam, then call him Imam Sahib. But if he's like just that guy who's turned up, I don't think he should have that unfair burden of pressure on them.
So functional title.
Yeah, it's a functional title, and I think that's unfair for them because I just think they're trying to figure it out. And we're putting added pressure on them.
This is no offense to doctors here, but you know what I don't like is when a doctor will come to meet you and he'll say to you, I'll say to him, who are you? He goes, I'm Dr. So-and-so. And you're thinking, I'm not in your surgery, you're going to have to call you doctor. Have you seen that happen?
Yeah.
So it's like you're in the grocery store, in the barber's, and the guy goes, मैं Dr. So-and-so हूँ. You're thinking, well, welcome to the barbers. Just as you treated me in the surgery, I'm going to show you how I'm going to treat you. Yeah.
On the subject of doctors, doctors obviously advise people just like how scholars advise people. And I think when you're a doctor, and I think Dr. Mutar was saying this, like learning doesn't stop. And you're constantly, new things that you're learning, and you constantly have to, review what you've studied already and have constant exams to keep their accreditation and stuff like that. And I think anyone that I know that's of benefit to the community, like I was saying before, whether they've come out of the madrasa system and they've carried on studying, even if it's privately, even if it's private teachers, not necessarily through university, those are the people that have impacted the community the most. Whether that they didn't have to go to the uni to do that, they could have just done it, through their own private sources. And same with people that graduated from university in an Islamic science, they've come back, they might have gone up to do a master's and stuff like that, and they've carried on reading, and some have gone to like the more spiritual side, some people have gone towards the more academic side, but the ones that carry on striving to learn more, to try and be of the most benefit to their community, those are the people that I consider the gems of our society. Jerry's final thought.
Hashtag Naveed's gems.
Nav's got loads of gems, he just doesn't come out with them often enough.
He's like filled with gems, bro. He's like one of those X-Men that, just turns into gems. He's just like, his special power is all his body just like turns into gems and just falls apart. Have you seen that advert, that Skittles one, where everything he touches turns into Skittles? He's just like that, basically.
Nav turns everything into haram Skittles.
A poem. So anyway, I think we'll just check out a few more comments and then we'll finish off.
Okay.
Just to kind of mention one thing. I mean, the reason I was kind of saying, like, I was kind of disagreeing with certain points that Molana was making is because, I mean, because I've got the experience with being the director of studies out so far, and I get exposure to loads of different types of students and backgrounds where they come from, and I tend to hear the same type of like story where you'll have like a graduate, and like this was the same for me as well. I mean, to be honest, I didn't know what I was getting into when I was studying in Madrasah. That's the honest. Yeah. I didn't even know that I'm going to be giving talks or I'm going to be doing these kind of things. It was like later on, when after I qualified, it was actually Sheikh Zahir who actually gave me opportunity to teach at Sufa. And I actually started off teaching Maktab and like one class on the Alim course. That's what it was. But then it was through the exposure that you're right. I agree with what Naveed saying. It's like exposure is so important that it's like the exposure will mold the graduate into what he's going to do in his life. So there could be someone who, for example, like maybe he finishes, maybe he wants to go into university, and maybe he's like really an academic person. He likes researching, and he becomes a lecturer like Molana Harun Sidat. Inshallah, we're going to bring him on as well. And he was on earlier on in the comments, and he actually said this to me, and he said that we need to get more like traditionally graduated scholars in the university system teaching. He goes, because the people that are teaching Islamic sciences in the universities are probably the least well trained in that field. It's like the guy might be like a specialist in geography, and they might say, "Oh, we need someone to teach about the history of the Quran. Anyone want to do it?" And he goes, "Okay, I'll have a go. Here are some books. Read these." And then read a few books, and then go to the lesson. And he goes, they just like deliver something, and they won't even have any sort of official training in that particular. This is what can happen in universities. So when people, I think, see universities, they automatically assume that they're superior, the education superior, the students are superior. University graduates are just like, angels, secular angels. Yeah. And,
we know they bekar mufti sab.
Yeah, so I
University
think
graduates are useful as a hot pot of tea on some occasions, because what happens is that you go through university and you study a irrelevant topic, or you're not engaging with the topic, and so you come out in the third year with a 2-1 or a 2-2, and you're looking for a job, and then what happens is that you end up taking an entry-level job normally. So the university education that you had is sometimes irrelevant, because the skill sets that you picked up there, you're not going to use.
it's interesting how Google and these kind of multinational companies are starting to move away from recruiting, degree students, people with qualifications.
Mufti Saab, I've got a question for you. Sorry to interrupt you. What advice would you give to someone that's freshly graduated from a madrasah system? And then secondly, what advice would you give to someone that's maybe finished through a normal university but studied some sort of Islamic science? Would the advice be the same, or would it be to
Advice for what? What to do in life?
How to apply what they've learned in society?
I thought you were going to sing a Bollywood song there, the way that you looked in the sky towards the right-hand side, put your arm up.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you know what it is? I think I don't really have that much, I don't have that much sort of exposure to everything that's out there to be able to give but from my own experience, what I would suggest is, first of all, unfortunately, the problem lies in the pedagogy and the setup of many of the madrasa systems, right? They are very, very problematic. They're supposed to be on theory, on paper, it's one thing, but when you have application of it, you're getting people who are not really kind of qualified in teaching hadith, not qualified in fiqh, not qualified in these areas. And that's why when I raise the question with the Molana about the tarbiyah side, it's some institutes are actively, 80% maybe of their effort is going into trying to rectify character building. And I disagree with that. I don't believe character can be built by you studying some years a book from a person. Character is built by personal experience, being in the company of someone else, being an apprentice, going through the hardships of life, ups and downs. That's how you build character. Like the Sahaba. Yeah, Sahaba built character. When they had problems, So I think that's the first problem. If that's solved, let's say on paper, whatever the sort of institute is sort of promising on the paper, this is how the student's going to qualify. Then I think the next piece of advice would be that, look, if you qualify, I always say to people, do what you're passionate about. What are you inclined towards? What do you want to do? You want to just teach in a maktab? Alhamdulillah, do that. You want to become an imam of a mosque and 5 times a day lead the prayers and Jummahs, give talks? Alhamdulillah. If you want to do that, do that. Do you want to run an institute? Do you want to set your own one up? Do you want to, start some sort of online project or work on the side? Do you want to do a taxi driver? Whatever you want to do. But the thing is, you should always your knowledge should always reflect in whatever you want to do. Right? And don't try to mold yourself into someone else's lifestyle. Don't try to think, for example, Mufti so-and-so or Molana so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, they've got this amazing lifestyle. I want to be like them. You don't want to be. Right? The reason why you don't want to be like them is because you don't see behind the scenes the boring side of their life. Right? There's so many Molanas out there that if they were to tell you the real side of their life, you're not going to be interested. Yeah, who wants a life like that?
Without going into any personal details of anyone, some people that people might consider to be popular speakers, in their personal life and stuff like that, they're going through so many trials and tribulations, but never wish that. Everybody wants to walk in your shoes, but nobody feels the stones. And the grass always looks greener.
Point coming there, bro.
Painted concrete. Is concrete painted green?
You're about to come up with the poem there, but unfortunately, I broke your.
No, I'm just thinking out loud. Molana, you are right, though. It is tough, though, and one thing I definitely wanted to say is the expectations we were discussing earlier is very great of our community, whether that's people doing it on purpose or just That's something that they picked up from their own parents. They expect a person that's studied for 7 years now to answer all of their problems. That's definitely not the case. Go to an expert of that subject, whether it's an Islamic expert, whether it's a medical expert. And our people in general, if you don't know something, like Imam Malik used to say, if you didn't know something, he'd just openly and blatantly tell you that I don't know. Don't feel shy. Don't feel like you need to keep somebody waiting for an answer and go back and ask 15 of your friends to give an opinion. If you can signpost someone to the relevant kind of professional, that's what we should do.
I totally agree with that. You know, when I first graduated, I felt like a pressure that I had to help people answer their questions. People will contact me and people will say to me, "Oh, Sheikh, you know, this year, what time is Taraweeh in that particular mosque?" And I'll say, "I don't know, I'll find out." So I'll contact the mosque and find out when Taraweeh, and I'll get back to them and say, "Look, Taraweeh is at this time." So I felt that, you know, people think that I've got all the answers, so therefore I shouldn't let them down. And then after a while,
brothers and sisters who are listening to
Imam Malik said, I don't know, in 40 questions, 36 or 37 times, he said, I don't know, right? I'm going to follow Imam Malik in this one. I don't know, guys.
Brothers and sisters who are following this YouTube channel, Mufti Liaquat generally does not like answering your questions. Even if he has a pretend question and answer session, it is pretend. The guy is, look, Mufti Sahib is traumatized by the questions he's been asked for the last 15 years. Please, if you're watching his YouTube channel live, don't ask him questions. Just make statements like, your background looks amazing, Sheikh.
What's up? I've got a question here. It's a bit unrelated to the subject today, but genuinely just asking you, like, as someone that is concerned for you in general. You know, when people ask you all of these questions and they tell you about all their problems, how do you kind of, like, I don't want, like, that, like, the superficial answer, you know, I'll just make dua for him and move on. Like, I mean, like, how do you deal with it as an individual yourself? Because naturally, we're humans at the end of the day, and if somebody comes to you with an issue or a problem, and sometimes you can't sort it out, you're not able to help them. How do you live with, like, with yourself, and, like, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult. I mean, like, I'll tell you something. Once this guy came to me, he was contacting me. He goes, "I really need to speak to you, Sheikh, speak to you." So you see, what happens generally is you know, when people want to ask you a question, a lot of times they want to do it face to face. What they don't understand is sometimes I might be so busy. For me to take out 15 minutes of a day would mean my entire schedule has to be rescheduled again. So, you know, if you'd ask me next Wednesday at this time, what are you going to be doing? I can tell you what I'm going to be doing. Like, I know it. Because my schedule is so tight that everything fits in exactly. So when people say to me, Sheikh, it's only going to take 5 minutes. I know it's not 5 minutes. It's going to take a time. You got to come and then you got to do this and you got to sit down. So when it initially used to happen, I used to honestly sometimes, like, you know, take out time for people, go to their house or something, or they'd come to my house. And so once this guy contacted me again and again, and he was like someone I kind of know, like, through his brother. So then I thought, you know what, so he came down and he sat, and then he just said to me, he asked me like a question regarding, you know, a particular issue. And the guy just burst out crying and crying and crying. It's like literally for 2 minutes, I just sat there and he was just crying to me. Now, you see, I am a Pathan here. Pathans just fall off the mountain, and they get back up and they just run off. We don't have emotions. Like the famous Pathan saying goes, we don't break hearts, we break bones. So we don't break hearts, we break bones. So basically, I mean, I'm from a Pathan background, and I know generally to say 90% of Pathan, like male, masculines, will be a very sort of like a strong personality, right? And will not kind of show their kind of soft side. It's just the way you're brought up. You saw your dad do that. You saw your granddad do that. It's like, you know, regimental. You know, you got to kind of, but they are soft, obviously, with their families. So and with you guys, obviously, you know, soft with you guys.
Yeah.
So basically, anyway, going back to the serious part. So what happened was a guy crying too, and I don't know what to should I hug him? Like, I've seen it in films. You have to go to the person, you have to hug them, and you have to say, it's okay, carry on. You tap them on the back. Or what do I do in this situation? So I just sat there and I was saying to him, you know, may Allah make it easy for you. And honestly, I felt so comfortable in that situation, and I felt bad. The guy's crying. He probably hasn't cried in front of his parents about what's happened. And the guy's telling me something really kind of personal and secret about himself. crying, and then after a while he calms down, and then he's like, give him tissue, and he wipes his tears, and then I say, and I explained the masala to him. He felt better afterwards. But the thing is that now that's going to stick with me. I can't forget that. Yeah, and it's like, who do I go to kind of tell, like, to offload everything that's on my mind? Like, who do I go to now? Do I going to go to Sheikh Zir, sit down in front of him, start crying to him? Like, how does it work? Now, obviously, people do cry behind the scenes. Yeah.
Caseworkers have offloading people, Mufti Sahib, generally. So if you're a caseworker and you work in a professional capacity with people that are going through difficulties, you should have an outlet to access somebody who who you can offload to.
I think you're right. I think there needs to be something in place. Yeah, I think there needs to be something in place about that. But like I was saying, so that was one incident I remember very clearly, right?
Yeah.
There was like, another incident where I remember my mom said to me, "Oh, can you answer this lady's question?" Like, when I used to live in my mom's house, every time something happened, my mom would tell her friends, "Oh, don't worry, my son's a mufti. He can answer any of your questions." Then I would and the usual questions would either be about marriage, divorce, inheritance, or dreams, or taweez. 5 things. Yeah. And I said to my mom, "Look, why are you telling people that answer those questions?" She goes, "You are though. What did you do all those years?" So then I was with my mom, and I can't say no to her. So then I answer the phone, and I say, "Oh yes, gee, auntie. Yeah, what's the problem?" And then she's like, "Just tell me all her life story and this and that." I'm listening. And then I said to my mom, "Is that what you do? You just listen to all their life story?" He goes, "Yeah, that's how it goes." Then I realized answering people's questions, 5% is answering the question, 95% is just listening to them. That's all they need. It's just someone to listen to. And I said, that's not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to listen to people. I signed up to answer questions. So slowly what tends to happen afterwards to me was, I think I began to become a bit more sort of like abrupt. I started to kind of realize I can become abrupt now. I can tell people, stop, I don't know this answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does seem a bit rude to people sometimes. Some people will say to me, like some people in the beginning when they first met me, and then later on they go, "Do you know, the first time I met you, I thought you were very rude. I thought you were very..." And I'm thinking to myself, I know. That's how I deliberately come across. Is because if I'm not like that, people are just going to take my time. And so it's either, you either got to, deal with people like this, or... So I think, slowly these kind of things do kind of play upon your mind. And then you start to become desensitized to people's problems. People will tell you issues, and then you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I've heard this so many times. And it's for the first time it's happened in their family. Like, maybe it's like something to do with drugs or abuse or something. And then, you're thinking, I've heard this so many times. It's not new to me.
Yeah.
But that person will be thinking that, you need to empathize with them. And you lose that sense of, how do you empathize with them? What do you say to them?
I've got one other question, Mufti Sahib. I know we've gone on for quite a while. But before you started studying and, whatever influences you had to go and study, what is it like, expectation versus reality? Did you have what you're doing now as, like one of the, like, how can I say, is this a platform that you wanted to be on? Is it what you're doing now? Is this what you wanted to do? Or did you just find your feet? Or did you set yourself a goal that I want to be like a director of education at an Islamic institute? Did you set yourself some goals? Was it like, what was the expectation and where you are now? Like from what you studied?
To be honest, I didn't really have a long-term expectation. I know it's not really a kind of like, now thinking about it now, if I knew then what I know now, I would have had a more of a long-term goal of what I would work towards. And then if I have a long-term goal, I know what I need to improve on myself, like to become more effective. But now thinking about it, probably, my intention would have been like just a general thing. I want to benefit the ummah, like that kind of.
Yeah.
I just want to be like service of the deen, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of thing, I think. But I never imagined that I'd be, teaching like this, or maybe running a like a syllabus or something, or I never imagined that would happen. And I don't even know in 10 years' time where I'm going to be in reality. I've got some ideas, but the reality is I don't think anyone knows where you think about yourself now. Do you think you'd be where you are now?
No.
You remember when I met you, the first time I met you, or one of the first times was we used to work before in the coffee. Yeah. That was like the first kind of like time I kind of really kind of knew Naveed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And alhamdulillah, like, even in 5 years, like my
It's a
whole
long
job,
time, man.
yeah,
Very
everything.
long time. And Altaf, same Altaf. Altaf, he was like in school with us. Yeah. And all those guys in like our school, remember where all these guys gone? Asif Patel and Jamil Rawat.
He's still
All those
around, man.
guys.
Jam's still around, man.
He's still around, yeah? Haven't
Yeah, I
seen
see
him for a while.
Asif as well sometimes in
The
Salah.
most rated guy from your school, I don't know, man, is Real Talk UK. He's like the most. He's on the highest maqam from what I know. The most.
So Real Talk UK is a friend of mine who I went to primary school with and secondary school with.
Legend.
Yeah.
Yes, but he's like really famous on Instagram and stuff.
Proper funny guy, man, mashallah.
Yeah, so
He sounds
I personally think, look, I would love a student, right? Right, the sentence is going to finish. I would love a student who just remained as they are from before they studied to after they qualify. Just stay as they are. And just improve those small little things in their life that are, against the morals of Islam, teaching of Islam.
Mufti Sahib, you just described me. I stayed the same. I started studying with you. I didn't study much. I finished studying with you. I'm still the same.
When he's still praying, you love
Allahu
body.
Akbar.
When he started, and now he's
Allah.
still praying, you love body.
This just studying part in between wasn't that long.
The guy's name is Altaf. He doesn't wear a scarf.
When he's a laugh.
He's a good guy to have a laugh.
MashaAllah.
So yeah, I mean, that's what I like students who are just themselves. You be natural, and I like to be natural as I am. Yeah, I don't like to put things, put a show on or anything. Obviously, when I give talks, sometimes people think that I'm a bit scary, but that's like the talk thing, and you gotta kind of put something on. But just generally, I like to be myself. I like to behave as I am. And some people will say to me, "Look, no, you should behave in this particular manner because you're representing the Deen." But then I think to myself, like,
I didn't
what if I
sign
make
up.
a mistake? What if I make a mistake in my life?
I didn't sign any document to represent the deed.
Yeah, I didn't sign a document to kind of like wear a particular sort of like attire or be like a certain way or respond to people in a certain way. If people like me how I am, alhamdulillah. If they don't like me how I am, then if it's against Islam, I will try to change myself. But otherwise, I think that's the
Plenty
main
of the
thing.
scholars in the sea.
It's bang on, Mufti Sahib, what you're saying. I get a lot of people asking me, "Oh, bro, how do you know this guy? This guy's famous. I listen to his lectures. Why does he get on with you?" I go, "Bro, because when I see him, I'm just normal with the guy. I'm exactly how I am with you." And I think that's why he kind of appreciates it, because he's got so many yes men around him that, when he comes across somebody that's genuine, not that I'm saying I'm genuine, or maybe I'm genuine, Allah knows best. But you know what I'm trying to say. If you be yourself, people appreciate you a lot more anyway.
The most comfortable situation I've ever been in. Guess when it's been?
Radio with me.
When I used to do MMA.
Allah.
I mean, obviously, I know you guys, innit? But I'm talking about with general public, like people who don't know me.
Yeah.
The most comfortable I've ever been is in MMA. Because like in MMA, you usually get all the thuggy kind of guys, random kind of guys, So you'll get some guys who are not practicing at all, and they call me by my name, yeah, and they'll speak to you, they'll ask you kind of average stuff, general things. Have you done this? Have you been here? Have you been there? And you think, yeah, okay, this is how it is when you're normal human. Is this how it is? That what you guys talk about? This sounds good. I'll spar with you. So the most comfortable time. And then what I find is when people feel that you're in your own comfort zone, they are able to open up to you a lot. They can ask you things.
We've come across some underlying issues. Mufti Sahib has to get beat up just to feel normal. This is a topic for a different day.
He's from Lozelles, bro. That's what happens when you're from Lozelles, Handsworth area.
No,
I only
no,
feel
I don't like that.
I only feel comfortable when I'm getting a beating.
I think I got enough on my hands when I was in what's it, in Maktab. Yeah, so
Mufti Sahib, but those parts aren't going to burn in Jahannam. You're right.
Allah, okay, let me
You
think.
can do handstands in
Over
Jahannam.
here, this place is saved. The nose is saved. Yeah, I got punched here. My back.
Mufti Sahib can do handstands in Jahannam because he's got so many smacks on his hands.
Oh, but yeah, remember those days when you'd believe anything someone says to you.
If he was your ustad, you would.
Yeah.
The days when you write 786 on top of your pages.
You know, my Ustad, when he used to say that your parts of your body won't burn in Jahannam, you'll be like, hit me on my feet, hit me on my feet.
And you're telling all your friends, your competition at the end. Like, where do you
I'm
get
going to
hit?
be walking,
No,
bro.
This man. Yeah, I mean, I personally think that's, and I genuinely think there are lots of people out there, maybe from like a conservative, or maybe from like Molana circles, who just want to be like average person, just want to. They're like, doesn't mean that they want to discard their Islamic sort of identity.
Yeah.
It's just they want to have the opportunity just to be themselves, and then it just makes them feel more comfortable, and it makes them. But then you can say maybe one of the other problems is people. They want scholars to behave in a certain way, like the Arab sort of scarf and the pure white jubba, right? And the beard has to be the right size, and the perfume has to be the right temperature.
He has to be one of those cheap £2.50 bottles
What's it called, man?
that hurts your nose.
What was
when
the
you
name?
walk past them.
What was the name of the song?
Oh, what? Oh, Darbar Jasmine. That's a Cam. You need to get me Darbar Jasmine. Yeah, if you don't get me Darbar Jasmine, bro, you know what? It's over between us. It's over, bro. No more massages for me. Yeah, I don't want any more massages from you. Yeah.
I think we're a natural impasse and an end now.
Okay, so what do you guys think of this new? Setup platform?
It's all right.
Viewers, what do you guys think? And YouTube's on. What do you guys think?
Hardly spoke. Love it.
Because I need to make a decision in the next 2-3 weeks if we're going to keep it or not. You think it's easier? And we can actually bring up to 10 guests on this.
Mufti Sahib, on a Zoom call, you can have like 40 guests if you wanted.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Tahmeed saying he much prefers this one much better. I mean, this saves me the hassle. The problem is see, this is actually much more light on my computer because it's just running through the website.
Yeah.
The other one I have to use software, third-party software, and that like really slows the computer down. That's
Is
why
that
we get
OBS?
Yeah, I'm not using OBS now.
Oh, okay, you're just going straight through.
And I'm actually live streaming it to 2 Facebook accounts. And I can live stream it to 2 YouTube accounts and others.
Yeah, I was going to add my YouTube account, but I got 1 subscriber, so I could probably invite him myself.
Allah. Astaghfirullah. You only got 1 subscriber. You are insincere, my brother. Why did you tell us you got 1 subscriber? You should have told us you got 0.
Yeah,
no, man. I just stick to Facebook.
Before we wrap up tonight, is there any disclaimer that anybody wants to put out, or feels that we need to put out? I think we've explained everything already.
Yeah, I think we have explained everything. That look, this wasn't a kind of go at the looms or anything by any stretch of any imagination. Yeah. It was more about kind of understanding what we as a community expect from my perspective. And I know Molana and Mufti Sahib had their own conversation going on about Darul Ulooms themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, guys, please don't kind of like snip and cut from this and show when I was kind of like saying I disagree with you and then say I disagree with you on on Islam. People, chop those Trump kind of like speeches. But I mean, see, what I see, guys, is that these kind of podcasts. The point of these podcasts is if we can't discuss things openly that people have in the community. In a controlled environment, then I don't think there's any point in having podcasts. If you're having podcasts just for our own entertainment, it's pointless. But if you're having for a purpose, which is bringing people on that we can discuss things and people can see how the discussions sort of like evolve. Yeah, maybe for example, like we'll hear something from a guest and our view might change about a certain thing. Maybe the guest might hear something from one of the hosts and might start thinking later on and start thinking, I didn't think of it this way. All things can happen. And we might not hold the same views in the beginning of our journey. We might not necessarily hold the same views in the end. But the thing is, I think the most important thing which Naveed kept on saying, which was the respect. We need to show respect to each other. As Muslims, at the end of the day, we are Muslims. If we disagree with someone, and I don't think we should be kind of saying, this person like this, or they don't know how to do this, or, I think we need to have, this kind of tolerance inside of ourselves as well. And that is something which podcasts is going to bring up as well. We are going to talk about topics which might be very controversial. We're not having a go at anyone at all. The ultimate thing is the deen of Allah is bigger than anyone. Yeah. The religion of Allah is bigger than any scholar out there, right? Any imam, anyone, the Prophet ﷺ and Allah bar them. But the deen of Allah is the greatest thing for us. And this is the thing that we want, to instill in our lives. And we're living in the West, so we've got to wake up one day and say, you know what, we've got to know how to live in the West as Muslims. We need to know, be able how to identify ourselves as Muslims, identify the problems in our own community, our families, in our masajid, our madaris, because these are the future of our communities, right? If we are just like turn a blind eye and say, okay, it doesn't matter what's happening, they just ignore it, then end of the day, who's to blame, really? I think.
Sometimes we might even ask a question where we might not even like that is the right question to ask, but we're only asking it because so many people have presented it to us, and the audience also has a right to know of that particular subject. So that sometimes is the case. If you ask somebody a question, it's not because we believe something and we're trying to agree them to come to our type of understanding. It's because so many people have asked this question and we want to hear this person's perspective on it as well. And like Mufti Saab was saying, respect is the key thing. We can differ, but that doesn't decrease the love that we have between our brothers.
And if anyone does think that they can contribute to the podcast and maybe come on as a guest, we're more than happy to invite people on. The only kind of condition that we have one condition here, which is, just keep it halal, yeah? Yeah, just keep it, respectful, and respectful conversations, we are more than willing to have with our guests. But like I said, we can have up to 10 people. We can have up to 10 people on this year. So if anyone does want to talk about, there could be topics in our community, for example, like at the moment with the furlough finishing, right, in October, financial issues. Maybe someone's good in the finance area. Maybe someone's good in, estate agent, or maybe that might be a good topic in the coming days, coming weeks, to discuss what are the options people have to bring someone on that can discuss these kind of things. HR as well.
How HR before. Rundown neighborhoods. Who wants to talk about that?
Rundown neighborhoods, yeah. Altaf, we cannot hear.
There's a couple of brothers who moved out to the countryside. It might be good to get them on to see what it's like to move away from Darul Islam.
Now, when you say countryside, what do you mean, like a farm or something?
Yeah, they've just moved out more rural.
Oh, actually, I know a guy who's actually gone off the grid. We can get him on.
No, he's
off the grid.
There's a paradox there. Yeah, so he used to study at Sufa, and now he's starting to rear his own sheep and goats, stuff like that.
Yeah. And
he's gone off the grid, so he wants to kind of like totally go off grid. So he's like partially still got the mobile phone. But yeah, I think people like that. I'd love to listen to people like that. People who have experience in this kind of field, these areas.
Do you know anyone that does Farafa Mufti Saab, like face reading, like an old school Islamic science?
Yeah, that would be good, And someone is actually mentioning today in the comments, not these comments, there's a few scholars' names they were giving who are apparently like really good in these kind of areas.
Yeah.
Experienced in jinn, ruqya. Maybe bring someone like that. I would love to have a Pir Shuf Shuf on. Yeah, you can ask him some questions. You heard a Pir Shuf Shuf. Yeah, it gives that Shuf Shuf kind of. I don't mind bringing different people on, different backgrounds. It gives an interesting sort of like a dimension to Islamic conversations.
If anybody knows Dr. Talib Al-Habib, he's somebody that I'd love to have on. And that'll be another episode of me being completely silent and just listening because he's
I know.
I think his name is Dr. Asim. You'll find.
Dr. Asim.
Not Dr. Talib Al-Habib.
He'd be good.
Sorry, Dr. Asim, a.k.a. Talib Al-Habib.
Yeah, so Sheikh Suhail Hanif, yeah. Altaf. I can speak to Sheikh Suhail. We can set a date, inshallah.
Let's get Sheikh Suhail on, man.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have someone like that. Yeah, but yeah, I think. You know what, Altaf, you need to do your one on homeschooling, because now the homeschooling issues.
We can do one on homeschooling. I know. We'll get some homeschoolers on, and then we can destroy them about how it's a bad idea.
And we need to get Haludi Foodie on again, because I think about it.
Yeah. If you're watching, bro.
Where's my invite? The wing.
We're watching your Instagram posts, yeah?
Oh, have you seen another sheikh's just been mentioned in the comments?
Allah. I don't have an issue. I don't know about you guys. I don't have an issue in bringing anyone on as long as the discussions are going to be respectful. Yeah. That's the honest truth. I don't mind bringing anyone, because at the end of the day, look, we're living in a community where we don't want to just backbite people for whatever, slander them. And I think, we should have respect for people, listen to what they have to say. If we disagree with them, we disagree with them. End of the day. And maybe a lot of people may disagree with, Mufti Abu Layth. That's fine. That's up to them. They disagree with them, right? But at the end of the day, discussion, I think, and having people like maybe bringing on some non-Muslims, I think that would be a good, interesting thing. I was actually going to contact, Molana, what's his name, Nasir,
for outreach.
Interfaith. I think interfaith is very important. How do we interact with the wider community, especially when people are coming from like a bubble community, a very Muslim-oriented community, and then they're going and working in like an environment that's 90% non-Muslim.
Yeah.
How do they adjust in that environment? How do they find working with different faiths, different communities? I think that's a very important.
Also interfaith. So there's a particular narrative out there that if somebody disagrees with what your methodology might be, that you're not allowed to work with the person or can't come to the same table for some greater good. And showing and presenting a narrative that obviously counters that, and giving examples from the past, and maybe having someone that belongs to a different school of thought or whatnot. I think that'd be.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think, I think we should bring international people as well. Yeah. Imran Khan. Yeah. I think we should bring on like people from America.
I know a few Imran Khans, but I don't think he's the president of Pakistan.
Would you refer to one from the
I got a cousin called Imran Khan. I got my first cousin Imran Khan.
I got a few people on WhatsApp called Imran Khan as well.
Are you guys referring to the one from the Netherlands, the one that drives the Lamborghini? You know about that guy, yeah? One of the black leather seats in the car.
It's 12:30, guys. Let's go, man. Let's go.
All right, guys. Take care, inshallah. Take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.